I don't really value it that much. Still gonna do a little bit of stance damage, still gonna have access to the all the time, 40% damage every 90 seconds. So yeah, even though this thing can cause poison pretty quickly, it's not that good. Now there can be one specific use of like carrying it alongside a poison-based ball, Kill and Miss instead, because Kill and Miss is gonna give you a very similar benefit, but you're just gonna pop the better status effect, and this is saving a talisman slot too. Number 99, Holy Ground. Now this is a shield-based skill that does some of this holy-based magic sigil on the ground, and then standing upon this magic sigil, you actually get a whole bunch of health regen and more damage negation. I think it's just counterintuitive. Now there might be some instances where you can use some slower types of skills, or the Iron Girl automatic, and this playstyle might be pretty good, but honestly, I think this skill would have benefited much more if it was like an aura buff, or if the AoE was like 30 times as large. Number 98, Carrying Greatsword, which this is a very high damaging magic-based skill. You can charge up to do nice stance damage, really good damage. You don't really get any eyebrow out of your skill. Doesn't actually consume any FP at all, but the main reason why it exists is because you can have your thrusting shield in your left hand, and when you click L2 or the skill-based button, you can also do a light attack as well, and obviously this gives the ability to block on top of this. Which a lot of attacks off of thrusting shields are actually pretty good. They do nice stance damage, they're pretty quick, they do piercing damage, but yeah, that's basically the only use of this magic ward. 96, Storm Assaults. Now this skill is probably going to be mainly for PvP, as it does like stun lock enemies and do like amazing damage, but in PvE, it basically stun locks nothing, even like enemies like Millennia or Knights, doesn't stagger them whatsoever, and obviously it just sucks in terms of tracking. The damage is not really that good, it's a longer animation, you can get staggered out of it too. There are like plenty of other different types of like storm-based skills, other different types of spore-based skills that get very long to the follow button, but they can perform much better than this one. Number 95, Poison Moth Blast. Now, how this works is that when you put poison on an enemy and use this skill, it does a plus percentage of damage, in this instance 5% damage, which is identical to the Poison Bar Wounds Twice skill in the DLC. Now that one is going to be way better, so it does more damage, one just burned off, you can turn the launch of any weapon, or still Scarlet Rot, so it's just going to be the much better version. But even if that version didn't exist, I still would put this lower on the list, because it's just not that good. They have a terrible launch, you get no high armor, the damage really isn't that good, and the whole concept just makes it like a worse version than a Blade build, because Blade does way more percentage damage. Number 94, Golden Parry. Now, I have no idea why they nerfed this skill as much as they did, because it used to be like the best parry skill in the game, and parrying in this game was still pretty niche, so I don't really understand the change. But basically, it gets just as many parry frames now as a medium shield parry, which is like a very small amount, and it's going to be very hard trying to land a parry. Now, field actually does it at a distance for a small FP cost, but otherwise, I would just never really bother with this, because parry variation now is going to be a much better version. Number 93, Vow of the Indomitable. Now this is a very niche shield-based skill, in that it only gives you a bunch of iframes, which can be pretty good, but you're just staying in the one location, it gets pretty long recovery frames, so like you can spam it over and again, sweet. This is one of a bunch of different types of like harder hitting skills that you get equipped on the larger type weapons, and I find this one to be one of the least valuable ones, as the animation is pretty long, and the stance damage doesn't really make up for it either, and I just consider it to be directly up plus by stance upward cut, because that one is a bit quicker and can send enemies flying into the air. I kind of wish that these two skills were combined into one. That would have been really nice, but unfortunately that's not the case. Number 91, Mighty Shot. Now this is like a sniping-based skill for like medium and small types of bows, which if you're going to be using a sniping-based bow, great bows are just going to be much better at doing this. Now obviously these actually have higher strength requirements, so with the dexterity build, you're probably better off with something like Mighty Shot, but even then I'd just rather have rain and powers, as I believe that this skill complements the weapons much better. Number 90, Earthshaker, which is a strength-based skill that does show the exact same animation as things like Golden Lens and Blades of Darkness, but I'm going to find those ones much more interesting and they have a lot more things going for them, as this one is just like a short-range AoE attack, which compared to things like Ground Slam and Horror Roots Earthshaker, I'm just going to prefer those ones much more, as this skill does have a longer animation and less hyper armor. Number 89, Through and Through, which is one of the sniping-based options for the Ghost Bows. Now this one is more so as like a collapse-based option, because it can like hit through enemies and actually hit multiple enemies at once, and actually is some like unique interactions with some arrows against large types of bosses, and that it can hit them multiple times, but I think things like Rain of Arrows could just do this exact same job but better, and also Kingdom Straight Hunt, which is after one of the DLC, is like a much better version of a sniping-based skill, because it can just do more damage. But still, Through is going to be in the base game, so you can just use this one until you actually get there. Number 88, Gravitas. Now, I don't value this skill whatsoever. It is like a short range magic attack, doesn't do that for the damage, doesn't get any high from it, the stand damage is pretty poor as well, and the entire gimmick of sucking the enemy in towards you is honestly more of a downside if anything. And also, if you wanted to go with this skill, I'd rather just go with the Alabaster's Longsword instead, because this version of the skill is just much better as it goes like twice as far, and it does way more damage too. Number 87, Light Skill Fist. Now this skill can very well defeat a lot of smaller enemies, specifically things like knights and soldiers, because it actually does both as a grab attack, and you can just like instantly grab them over and over again, and it's get a whole bunch of damage off, and actually get a whole bunch of health regen. Now the reason why I still don't get this low on the list is because 90% of the enemies can't be grabbed, so it's like a very niche thing. You could just like have a secondary fist base weapon, just level it up, have Light Skill Fist to put onto it, and it's for a user when you're struggling against some certain types of knights, but that's about it. Number 86, Warcry, which is one of the few different raw types of weapon buffs, all of which actually gives you a damage boost and changing up your heavy attack. Now for the most part, it actually changes up your heavy attack for the worst, because in most cases when you're actually using type heavy attacks, you want to go with the stance break. And with Warcry heavy attack changes, it makes the animation last a lot longer. There are some instances where like, the heavy attack is a lot better than what it used to be, specifically with things like polearms and whatnot. But I still think that Warcry is still outclassed by things like Vancover, because the heavy attack changes are basically the exact same, but Vancover just gives you a better damage boost, more defenses, and actually faster stamina recovery speed, whereas Warcry doesn't get anywhere near as many benefits. Apart Warcry is a faster animation, and you get only benefits of the skills by just having them one-handed, whereas Vancover you have to have them two-handed. Number 85, Barrage. Now this is a bow-based skill that lets you just rapid fire a bunch of arrows. Now per arrow the damage is going to be worse as it is stat effect if it's like a regular arrow shot, but the DPS is still going to be a little higher, and it's always going to be really easy to use, and in most cases it can actually like melt enemies somewhat quickly, but even then it's still like an arrow, so it's not going to do as much damage as you would like, and it's not going to be as efficient as it's using like the regular bow movesets. Number 84, Rolling Sparks, which is probably the best skill to equip onto the purple bottles, which really isn't saying much because I only really get a handful of options to begin with. But Rolling Sparks is still okay. It goes relatively far. It can actually explode multiple times. Against larger bosses, it's really good. Against smaller enemies, it is definitely not, because enemies like to move around a whole bunch. Rolling Sparks don't really have that traction potential, and you're only going to be able to explode with like one or two different parts of the projectile, so it's not good at all. And against larger bosses, you're better off using like running heavy attacks with the purple bottles, as they're actually pretty decent and definitely the best part about the weapon. But it actually does go pretty far with Rolling Sparks, so hitting like larger bosses at like a distance is probably going to be the only use. Number 83, Charge Force, which is one of a handful of types of poking attack skills, and all poking attack skills are really good. This one's probably better for PvP as it can like stun out enemies, whereas in PvE, against enemies that cannot be staggered, is like borderline useless. I just much rather have things like Imperi Thrust, and yes, it actually can hit multiple times with this skill, so maybe with like the multi-hit talismans or step spells it can be pretty good, but I think something like Repeat Thrust or Blood Tax is outclass this one. Number 82, White Shadowed Lure. Now this skill works very similar to the alluring skills from the previous games, and then it throws out this little dummy for like enemies to get hyper towards. Now for stealth-based combat, things like Assassin's Gambit are probably just a lot better, but if you are in like the middle of a fight and enemies are hyper towards you, you can just use this to redirect their attention, which would be pretty good for like most of the game, but to get it more when the concentrated stealth move would definitely make some of its usefulness a lot less important. Number 81, Sacred Ring of Light. Now this skill is a holy based projectile attack that you can consecutively cast over and over again with some full-on types weapons. Now the thing is, this skill is just completely outclassed by the Halo side, because that version of the skill works very similar, but it just goes way further, staggers better, and does a bunch more damage for only 2 more FP cost. So if you actually like this aesthetic, that is just going to be the much better weapon. But obviously this is an active war, so you can infuse it into other different types of weapons. So if you actually want to fight enemies like with either fire damage or hold damage, you can always switch back and forth. But even then, something like Sacred Blade are probably just going to value more. Number 80, Raging Beast, which is a skill of the Beast Force that actually does do like this little ice-breaking dodge into like a jumping attack. Now the thing is, I don't value it much because it doesn't do that for the damage. It's a long animation. It has you jump into the air, which means that sometimes you can like jump into it. Still can hit many times in quick succession, potentially proc status effects really quickly, can do some nice damage, and you also can like stand perpendicular to an enemy to get like a long part of blade, especially if you're using things like full-on type weapons. Now the thing is, I don't really care for it as much as other different types of spinning skills, so when you're actually using small types weapons, I'd rather have things like Spinning Slash, because it can stun block better, do more stance damage. With water type weapons, stuff like Stormcaller and Spinning Strikes are just going to do way more damage, more stance damage, better stun lock potential, and probably just be safer as well. The drone is okay, it's not too bad, but they're just much better options in my opinion. Now, getting into the B tier, this is going to consist of a bunch of like really average skills, and sometimes we have a couple of niche uses. Sometimes the things that are actually really good, but it probably is outclassed by something else. But getting in at number 78, we have Raptor of the Mist. Now, this is an iframe dodging skill that does result in a jump, which being able to immediately jump after an opening starts means you actually can just maximize your damage. You get a whole bunch of attacks off potentially, so it can pair nicely alongside some jumping attack types of build. Now, it doesn't really give you a bunch more iframe than you normally would with a dodge roll, so some types of attacks that are harder to dodge or like are basically impossible to dodge, you might be able to with Raptor of the Mists. Now, the thing is with this skill, I kind of wish I had a bit more going for it, because it is pretty hard to actually land an attack when you're just jumping directly up and down. Because normally with jumping attacks, you actually can get some like lateral movements and actually jump pretty far forward. But with Raptor of the Mist, you're just going straight up and straight down. So in a lot of cases, you might just be able to miss. You also can't iframe dodge certain types of attacks and status effects, like Millennia's Healing, like the Malekith's Dust and Death effect. You can't be able to dodge those things at all with Raptor of the Mist. And I kind of wish I had like a bit of a damage boost, because like with skills in this game, there's no like broken and so many different types of weapon buffs that just help boost your damage. And I feel like something like Raptor of the Mist could have been a bit more than just like an iframe dodge. Number 77 is Determination, which is a very solid weapon buff. It boosts your damage by 60%, but it is only for your next attack, because after you hit the weapon once, then it's just going to remove the effect and you have to reapply it, which is a pretty quick animation, so it's not too bad, but it does pair very nicely alongside some charged heavy attack builds, which charged heavy attack builds, especially early on, are really good because you have access to the Spikes tier and the Act Talisman, and all these three items you get Light and Lingering. So it actually can just break open the entirety of the game very easily with something like this. Now the thing is, I'm not going to value it as much later in the game, because games like Rolling Knights Resolve exist. This is basically the exact same thing, but just 80% more damage instead. And you also can get access to stuff like Fight Blade, which I'm probably going to prefer more with charged heavy attack builds too. Number 76, Lightning Wreck. Well, yes, despite the name of this game looking kind of stupid, it actually is genuinely a good skill. It is lightning skill, scales up dexterity, can do some really high damage for only 5 FP per swing or per spin. It actually can be lowered to the ground as well, so I wonder if that's fine enough going under your head. And the damage is actually really good. Now, it doesn't have the downsides of one of the bigger being closer to the enemy, so I'll be a bit risky. The starting animation might be a bit too long, the stamina cost might be too high, and I kind of wish it got boosted by things like the Death mindset from the DLC. It would actually boost a bunch of lightning skills, but this one is just not included for some reason. That would be pretty nice. So it actually is a pretty fun and good skill to use. Nice lighting up for the dexterity build, probably the best one at that. But it probably just lacks a little bit more damage, and it might be a bit risky still. Number 75 is Alexa's Slap. Now this skill actually can run you pretty far, stun lock some small types of enemies, do okay damage, okay stance damage. The thing is, there's pretty other skills that could probably do this as well. Like an also lunging pretty far, but probably just do more damage, more stance damage, and it's have better synergy with other different types of builds, because Levita's Slash is a magic-based skill. You're kind of limited in different types of infusions. Number 74, Barbaric Roar. Now this is one of those skills that came with your heavy attack and this button buff, very similar to Warcry, and as I told you about that one, I don't really value them as much because it changes up your heavy attacks to have these longer animations, because they can do really nice damage, they can potentially stun lock nicely, but they're going to have longer animations, therefore they're not going to be able to stance break as quick, and it's kind of losing your only way to be able to do something like that. And also for Barbaric Roar, even though some different types of heavy attack options could be pretty nice, like with the great swords or the spears could be pretty funny and have some nice stun lock potential, but I think Bragator is still going to help pass it outright because it does give you a defensive buff, and some of the pairings, especially with the pole-arm type weapons, are just going to be much better. Number 73, Bloodhound Step. Now, in a game where weapon skills do lots of damage or just give you really good buffs, it's pretty rare that you want to optimally build around the skill that is boosts your neutral game. But Bloodhound Step is pretty good. It's a nice dodge. Can actually cover in a lot of distance really quickly. Can actually help you retreat and actually gain a lot of distance. It can also be pretty good at dodging some attacks that otherwise would probably hard to dodge with a regular dodge roll. But sometimes with how hard it actually can dodge, you might just like overshoot your target and it's in a really bad position. So there can be some instances where Bloodhound Step is very useful, but I don't think that dodge roll is that bad. So why don't you want to sacrifice really the damaging skills to do something like this? Number 72 is Scattershot Throw. Now this is a skill that you can only put onto this Smith Security Dagger. Now it does come passive with it, Falls of Night, probably not a unique weapon, I'm not going to talk about that. But Scattershot Throw is definitely the best option to pair alongside of this Smith Security Dagger. Now actually they talk about this weapon somewhat recently, and I consider it to be very underrated. You actually can do some nice damage with the Dexterity Infusion alongside the multi-hit talismans, and I think Scattershot Throw is like the perfect pairing, because one of the downsides of the Smith Security Daggers is that enemies can dodge it very easily, especially if they're skinnier and more one and things like Scattershot Throw can help counteract that, as it also serves like a nice AoE, where things like a dodge around, they're still going to hit, and close the range you can stagger pretty well, then with some headshots. It's like a nice complement to the weapon, not the most useful thing in the world. I probably still would have recommend using it with a blade-based infusion, because the damage is really bad, and at that point you're better off just using the Falls of Night, but it still is very nice. Number 71, Stand Upward Cut, which is a very high damaging attack skill that you can equip onto large types of weapons. Does actually have some nice height armor, can send enemies flying into the air, does some good stance damage. And I can value it more sort of things like Lion's Claw or Giant Hunt. Probably not. I would have valued it a lot more if it actually could be combined with the other different type of stance skill, and have stance sweep and upward cuts together in one, have some more versatility, but for the most part it's a bit too slow in my opinion. For me it's more to use it over things like Lion's Claw. Number 70, Lightning Slash. Now this is a skill that actually performs for the lightning close range AoE attack, and actually can buff you up to more lightning damage for roughly 40 seconds. Now I think that buff is probably the best part to counter it, and only having a flat damage buff can be really good, but once you get later on in the game, it's definitely going to be less useful. And overall, I don't really care much for like the damage portion of this skill, because it is like a close range attack, it doesn't get much height onto large types of weapons, and there are two different parts to it. There is the roar effect and the big downward side. Now this roaring effect is actually really good. It can send smaller enemies down to the ground, and it can do a total of 40 stance damage and a nice AoE, which is really good, because you can just keep grabbing these parts over and over again, and if you do have the option, while the openings actually get the big slamming attack, you might as well just go for it, but in most cases I wouldn't really bother with it, because it doesn't really do that screen damage. It is like a really long animation, and in most cases you're going to take a bunch of damage in the meantime, but this like war attack is actually really good. Number 68, Thunderbolts. Now this is a lightning-based projectile attack, does scale purely off dexterity. You can damage over and over again for pretty cheap. The initial cost can be a bit too long, but if you actually just get into the momentum mode, it's cute. Then yes, you actually can output some decent amount of DPS. Now, stance damage or stagger potential is probably going to be like the worst part about it, and it kind of makes you prefer like other different types of dexterity-based projectiles a bit more. Things like Beast Roll, Storm Blade, Ice Spear, probably going to value those a little bit more so than Thunderbolt. But if you did find some enemies with some lightning damage, you could just switch to this one. Number 67, Cold Frost Stun, which is a cold-based skill that you can get relatively early on in the game. It does serve as a nice AoE, does some decent damage, and frost pretty quickly. But yeah, this is very easy to use, it's cheap. It can't really go too wrong. I feel like the worst part about it is going to be its total damage. It's not going to get too high, and it's going to be outclassed by Divine Beast Frost Stomp, which is in the DLC. This is like a much better version. Basically the exact same attack, but it just can be full charge to do more damage, and actually does do at least some stance damage, because regular Cold Frost Stomp literally does 0 stance damage.
There's a proven way to enhance athletic performance. 5 to 10%. Fans. Cheer in the stands. Become a performance-enhancing Canadian.
66 Ground Slam, which is a very decent AoE attack, as I talked about earlier with the Golden Slam. Basically the exact same thing, nice high armor, good stance damage. It's a good pairing alongside some smaller types of weapons that otherwise don't get the ability to stance break pretty quickly. And this one can do it for you. That is going to primarily scale up the strength stats, which might be a bit of a downside if you were to use some smaller, quicker type weapons that might scale them up dexterity. And also, I just consider it to be outclassed by a full Roots Traitor, which it might be a bit more risky. You don't really get as much high armor as Ground Slam, but you can get way more damage and way more stance damage in a larger AoE. And you're also going to get later in the game, so Ground Slam does have its uses, but it still might be a little bit out of cost. Number 65, Shared Aura. Now this is an aura buff that actually does boost the damage, very similar to Golden Bell, but actually doesn't really boost it for as much damage. Golden Bell's got about 12% damage, this one being 10% damage, but it actually does last 15 seconds longer. So sometimes in some boss fights, you're probably better off just using something like this instead, because more likely than not, the fight's going to last longer than 45 seconds. However, it actually doesn't boost your defenses, unlike Golden Bow, so I don't really consider it to be as useful, but it actually does have the secondary effect of doing bonus damage to undead enemies. So skeletons or death goats, you're going to do 50% more damage to these enemies with a skill like this one, and it's an aura buff, so you're going to slap it onto a dagger, use the skill, switch back to your main weapons, and it benefits of this much more damage to these enemies. Now the Golden Epitaph buff does this like way better, it boosts it by like 100% more damage, which is like literally twice as effective, and that one actually does require a little bit of faith investment, but I still recommend just going with that one if you just do have a little bit of faith. Number 64, Flame Skewer. Now this is a flame art based skill from the DLC. Does share a very similar animation to the Giant Hunt, but it's not going to be anywhere near as good in terms of damage, stance damage, nor does it send enemies flying into the air like that. But it actually does get a full fire attack, which is going to scale primarily off phase, and it can do some nice damage. There's like an additional 15 stance damage, which is pretty good, and also buff the weapon with more fire damage, for about 15 your option overall. This one can like stun lock a little bit better, and can like initially come out a bit faster, but I just think that Flame Spirit is going to be the better one. Number 63, Savage Claws, which is one of the skills that is for the Beast Claws. And I think this is the best pairing for this weapon, as it does actually stun lock enemies very nicely, and hits multiple times in quick succession, help proc the multi-hit talismans. It actually can proc status effects really quickly. You do get stuck in somewhat of a longer animation, but thankfully you actually can cancel the last part of it, so it's not really that risky. Now, for the most part, I just think Beast Claws are just like outclassed by regular claws, due to them just getting way higher DPS, and even if you do account for the skill, it's still not going to get as much. Now, the stun lock potential is there, but if I wanted to use a Beast Claw, I'd rather just go with the Red Bear's Claw, because the skill of this weapon is somewhat similar, but it can just stun lock better, and its output much higher damage, so it's okay, but it's still a little bit outclassed. Number 62, Golden Lance. Now this is a wholly based skill that you can only equip onto larger types of weapons, and it is actually a nice little 2-for-1 type of skill. It serves as like a short range AoE attack, and it can be like a nice sniping option as well. Now, the fact that it does do holy damage is going to be a downside due to like a lot of enemies in the base game just being very resistant to it. Now, thankfully, the DLC actually has gotten a bit better due to like some enemies being weak to it, and there's more buffs that you can pair alongside with this. And you can also pair this up alongside the Great Stars to actually get some more health regen for every single one of these projectiles, which is pretty cool. Now, for the most part, you're going to be specced into a Faith build when using this because it does scale purely off Faith. And if you have Faith build, you're going to be using some spells. And this Golden Land's better than like a lot of different sniping options out there, like Frenzied Burst, Probably Not, and there are probably some better AoE spells that you could use or other different types of holy spells that could probably just cover this niche anyway. But it can actually just cover two different things for once, so you probably can just save on some memory slots just by having this skill equipped, but it's still not going to be like the most amazing thing in terms of damage or stance damage or anything. Number 61, Glintstone Pebble, which is like a very generic, basic magic projectile attack. Obviously, it's going to scale purely off intelligence. The skill doesn't really go that far. It might still eventually end up being outclassed by the spells, as the spells could just eventually just do more damage, depending on which stuff that you do have. But this could be like a very solid early game option. Projectiles just cheese the entire game, in my opinion. You have to stay close to enemies. You can just like set it at a further distance. And Glintstone Pebble also gets the option of a follow-up attack, which can do some nice damage and some nice stance damage. Now, for the most part, I think this skill is directly outclassed by the Glintstone Crisp skill, as a Glintstone Dart is just, it can be fully charged, so it can go way further and just do way more damage. But this one obviously can be infused onto multiple different weapons, so if you didn't want to use a dagger, you could just pair it alongside something like a straight sword. But I think there are better projectiles out there that also just scale with magic and just do magic damage that could just perform better than this one. Number 60, Egon's Drake Hunts. Now this is like the sniping-based skill for your great bows. It does do more damage than things like through and through. Now unfortunately you get it all the way in the DLC, but great bows as a sniping-based option are pretty good. They go really far, and sometimes it's the best one to use. You can just aim at their head, and in most cases you're just going to be able to kill like trash mobs in just one hit. It's actually a pretty decent option if you are going to go through like some legacy dungeons or explore the open world. There actually are some bosses that can be cheesed by this type of skill as well, but for the most part, with this longer animation, it's not going to be like the most useful thing in like the heat of battle. Number 59, we have Beast Roar, which this is a dexterity-based projectile attack. Actually does go pretty far, do some very nice damage. Like this thing can cheese the entire game. Like I've done playthroughs of all these Ashes of War, and this one is definitely one of the easiest ones, but the reasons why it's still going to get lower on the list is because I still consider it to be outclassed by Stormblade, as Stormblade does actually go pretty far as well, but it just stun locks a lot better, does more stance damage, actually has a hitbox at closer range, and this can be spammed consecutively a lot faster than Beast Roar can. Now, Beast Roar is not going to be completely useless because Beast Roar can be equipped with basically every single weapon in the game. It can actually go a lot further than things like Stormblade can. And also, you actually can get more buffs for it earlier on in the game, like the Raw Medallion could help boost it, and things like the Highland Axe as well. So it's not that bad of an option, but it's probably still, once again, a bit outclassed. Number 58, Sword Dance, which is a pretty decent multi-hit type of skill. You actually can equip it on things like halberds and great axes, which is pretty funny. Can close in the gap nicely, can do an okay amount of damage. Now, getting stuck in this longer animation doesn't really necessarily mean it's like the best thing in the world. Also, the follow-up attack can be a bit too slow. The stance damage really isn't quite there. And it's to the point that I'd rather have things like Spinning Slash, Stormfall, or Spinning Strikes if I just wanted to output more damage or get more stance damage. But this one actually does lunge in pretty far, but I think that's its only use, and the fact that it's like pretty flashy to use as well. Number 57, Waves of Darkness. Now this is a skill that's very similar to things like Golden Land and Earthshaker, basically identical animation. You have to use a larger weapon, slam it into the ground, and it creates like this big AoE. And in this instance, it's going to be like a big gravity magic-based AoE attack. Obviously going to scale up intelligence, and the AoE can actually go out pretty far. It actually shoots out periodically over like a few seconds, so it can help stun lock smaller enemies for longer. The damage itself is not going to be too high. Now, thankfully, if you actually pair it alongside a cold infusion, these magic wave attacks actually can help proc frost as well, which could be a pretty cool and interesting pairing. But for the most part, still like it's somewhat of a longer animation, and I feel like it does lack a bit in the damage department too.
Maybe you'll be hired. Maybe you'll be promoted. Maybe you'll be in high demand regardless of the economy. Maybe you'll be CFO. Maybe you'll be irreplaceable. Maybe you'll be the nice one who finishes first.
Number 56, we have Savage Lion's Claw. Now this skill, if you did consider it to be an upgrade to regular Lion's Claw, I don't think that it actually is, because regular Lion's Claw can just do more damage and more stance damage in one hit, and also just like flatten enemies to the ground. Now Savage Lion's Claw can like lunge a little bit further, and you do get the option of a follow-up attack that actually does hit like a second and third time, and in this instance it can also flatten enemies to the ground, do more damage, and do basically just as much stance damage. but there aren't going to be many bosses out there that actually let you have an opening for that long, and if they do, you're probably just going to be better off just using 2 Lion's Claw attacks, which is one, probably not going to be as efficient, but it's going to help you do way more damage and way more stance damage. Now, Savage Lance Claw can hit like multiple times with the follow-up attacks, so it might be better with like the multi-hit talismans or status effects maybe, but it's like a very small niche use, and for the most part, I just don't really consider it to be as good as Lion's Claw. So yes, once again, another like B-tier option that's just inevitably outclassed. Number 55, we have Parry and Retaliation, to what I consider the best parry skill in the game. And parrying in this game I still consider to be somewhat niche because a lot of enemies cannot be parried, and the ones that can be parried require multiple successful attempts, and even in those instances, stance breaking build up probably is going to do you better, but there are some cases where like parrying can be really easy to pull off, and this one is just going to do it the best, because when you slap this on like either a medium shield or a small shield, you're actually going to get some of the most, actually the most parry frames compared to every other different type of parry. It also doesn't consume any types of FP as well, unless you actually do parry and deflect projectile attacks, specifically like magic or like spell-based projectiles. Actually can turn it into your own attack itself, which can be okay for some cases, but like it's not going to do like the most amazing damage. But yeah, for the most part, if you're using this type of skill, it's just to be able to use it as a regular parry. Number 54, Overhead Stance, which this skill is only equipable onto the Great Katana, and just like all stance-based skills, they can be really good and output a high amount of damage. Now this one I still consider to be the worst of the stance-based skills, because all the other ones will probably typically get good stance damage, which I think this thing definitely lacks. Like that triple swinging attack that you see, it only gets like roughly 20 stance damage, and that single swipe only gets roughly 10 stance damage. I kind of wish like that one of these attacks was like a high stance damaging attack, and the other one was just meant for just raw damage. That would have helped it out a lot more, because the way that it stands right now, this skill is just outclassed by things like repeating thrust and blood tax, because those can actually hit more times, upfront the multi-hit talisman better, gets more bleed builder, and also just be able to just get piercing damage, which is just the better damage type more so than slashing damage, which you kind of already get a lot of with the Great Katana. Now, the existence of the Rolana's cameo actually does make this somewhat useful, because with the Rolana's cameo, it actually can outdamage things like blood tax and repeating thrust, but that only involves you having to have that talisman equipped, which is another talisman slot, and you have to charge it up first, so that it's like an additional second. So overall, you get stuck in a longer animation due to having to charge it up, and the benefits are not really as great as things like repeating thrust or blood tax in my opinion. Number 53, we have a Flame of the Red Mains. Now yes, this skill was nowhere near as good as it used to be, because just like Blink Spike Bites, it actually did get nerfed to its stance damage a whole bunch. But thankfully it still is somewhat decent, as it does serve as a nice AoE projectile attack that does scale purely off strength, because it is a fire-based skill. So if you do have like a strength-based build, and you are lacking like some fire damage option or like a projectile option, you could go with something like this. And if you pair it once with the Freya's Greatsword, actually can help boost the damage even further, which is pretty nice. I just think it was nerfed a bit too hard in my opinion in terms of stance damage, and also things like Flaming Strike exists, which is like another skill that scales up strength. They work somewhat similar. The AoE projectile doesn't go as far, but the follow-up attack obviously can expect to do more damage, more stance damage, and buff the weapon, but not every single weapon can use Flaming Strike, so it's not completely useless. 52, Dry Leaf Whirlwind. Now this is a skill that can only equip onto the hand-to-hand arts, and it actually is this nice kicking flurry attack. Does do some nice damage. It can stun lock all these smaller enemies like knights really well, and it can cheese basically every single one of them. Can do some nice status build-up. Now against some like bosses that or enemies that cannot be staggered, or just larger enemies in general, I would never really use this thing, especially against those larger enemies, because it spins like way slower and attacks way slower than it otherwise normally would against smaller types of enemies. And it's to the points that I would just rather just use like the actual combos of the weapon, and I feel like the heavy attack combos can just do like a very similar job. So if I actually were to use a skill for the hand-to-hand art, I'd much rather have things like Palm Blast, as I think that skill can just better complement the weapon. Okay, now getting into the A tier, this is going to be the stuff that's just all really good. There's lots of good stuff. Sometimes it might not be as good as some other things. Maybe it's only good at certain parts of the game. Might still be a little bit outclassed, but it's good. But at number 51, we have Repeating Thrust, which this is one of many poking attack types of skills. This one being really good at stun locking and proccing status effects. And against all small types of enemies, this can just very well cheese them. Only gives him 7 FP and you just stun locking for days. Now against large types of bosses, I probably wouldn't really bother, because you do get stuck in a longer animation, and you're probably not going to be winning that trade, and I'd rather switch to things like Impaling Thrust or Piercing Fang instead in these instances. But you can put this skill alongside stuff like the sword lance or great katanas, which these get really high amounts of AR and really good status buildup, and it can just be like a very broken pairing even against these large types of bosses. They're just not going to stand a chance. Now the reasons why I'm not going to put it into the S tier is because I consider blood tax to be the better alternative. It is the identical animation, doesn't really get as much damage, but it does give you a bunch of health regen back. And also blood tax does get boosted by the Arnspark set, and the damage difference when having the set equipped is not that big, but this one still just does more raw damage, and also just consumes like half the amount of FP. At 50, we have Rain of Arrows, which this I consider to be the best skill to equip onto all different types of bows, doesn't matter what it is, light, medium, great bows, this is just the one, because it actually makes you do really respectable damage, and it's incredibly efficient. They only consume one arrow, and you just like raining down like 30 different arrows from the sky, and against larger bosses, you're just doing amazing damage, especially if you're using a great bow, and you can also help proc status effects quickly. But yeah, they didn't have to be that large. If you're like a slightly large enemy, you can do pretty nicely. Even like a smaller enemies, you can like somewhat stun lock them. It is really good and a nice solid complement to your bows, which are a pretty decent weapon class for the most part, and it's probably because of this skill. Number 49, we have Eruption, which is a skill for larger types of weapons. Actually does serve as some like magma-based AoE attack, does primarily scale up the strength stat as well. So if you are lacking some fire damage with a strength-based build, you could use something like this. And as of the DLC releasing, you actually can get 15% more damage with a skill like this due to the Talisman of the Dread. And the damage can be really good. It kind of lacks in a bit of stance damage. It is a close range skill with a longer animation, so against a lot of different bosses, especially in the DLC, it might not perform the best because they just don't really give you that long of an opening. But there are some bosses to where I probably would rather switch to this one, specifically the ones that are weaker to fire damage. But outside of that, there are other different types of like slower skills that you put on the larger weapons that you probably see later on this list that can just perform better. Number 48, Shield Crash. Now I see this one as like the direct upgrade to Shield Crash, because as I mentioned with that skill, it's going to be paired nicely alongside some smaller types of weapons that kind of struggle in staggering these larger types of enemies like knights and whatnot, and Shield Crash can just straight up just stun lock them and then send them flying to the ground, and also can do very nice damage depending on what type of shield that you have. If you have a great shield and paired alongside status effects, it actually can be a pretty decent primary based option. But I think that's its only use, and with shields being as niche that they are in this type of game, I can't really put it any higher. Number 47, Sacred Order. Now this is a weapon buff that just boosts your damage by 10%. Now the thing is, a lot of other weapon buffs in the game, things like Crag Blade, Royal Knight Resolve, Braggart's Roar, they're probably just going to end up being better weapon buffs for a skill. But the good thing about Sacred Order is that it actually puts the buff onto both hands. So you actually can put Sacred Order weapon like a dagger in your offhand, use the skill, and then your main hand is also going to gain a 10% damage boost. So if you actually want to go like a skill-based build, you're just going to get 10% more damage this way. And it also does work with your spells. Now, typically with spells, you're always going to have like a staff or a seal to boost the damage anyway, so you're probably better off going with something like that. Now, if there is a spell that actually doesn't get a catalyst to boost the damage, you could just go with something like this. And also with skill-based builds, there's like another way to optimize it. Now, this actually does involve you having to just have a dagger equipped at all times, because as soon as you remove it, you lose the buff. So if you want to two-hand the weapon, it's not going to be something that's for you, but it actually does give you the ability to do bonus damage against undead enemies. So skeletons, death birds, this is just another way to just melt them really quickly. You just use the skill, have your main weapon equipped, and you can just get a bunch more damage against these death birds. At 46, we have Bloody Slash, which this is a like medium range blade-based projectile attack. Actually does scale purely off arcane, and it's no hitting with it like a point blank range, doesn't make it do bonus damage, and like it doesn't actually have a weapon hitbox, it's just purely a projectile attack. And the damage can be really nice, the bleed build can be there as well. It's probably just spent for like this maximum damage in one hit with an arcane type of build. It's probably better alongside some smaller types of weapons, because otherwise with lots of weapons you can't really equip them with them anyway, and probably just better off going in a different direction. Things like Bloodblade just come to mind, as they were probably just going to be cheaper in terms of like HP costs. Now, just like Blood Concept, this is like very similar. I see it the same way. I do prefer Quick Step a little bit more because it is easier to spam, it's cheaper, less recovery frame, so there's less chances of actually getting hit. It also doesn't run as far as Blood Concept, but that could also be a positive because of one, things like backstepping attacks. Typically, when you actually use a backstep in Elden Ring, you don't really get high frames unless you use a talisman from the DLC. So if you actually want to utilize backstepping attacks, you can just go back with the quick step, and after this result, and it's a better different type of attack. And also, you're just not better than things like overshoot your target sometimes, where Blood Concept could. But Blood Concept obviously has the use of being able to close the gap quickly, or to retreat really quickly. But the same thing, I just rather have damaging basic skills, because my dodge roll is not really that bad in this game. Number 44, Secretary. Now this is a very solid bleed-based weapon buff. Actually does scale up to arcane stats. So going into a cold infusion with a weapon that already gets passive bleed is going to be the best pairing in my opinion. Because with a regular bleed infusion, I wouldn't really bother with it. So the base bleed build-up for Secretary is not that good. And with bleed infusion here, when you get that bit of an arcane scaling, so it's not the best benefit. But you could potentially even build if you're on power fencing. You can just have one of the weapons with Secretary. Because at the very least, when you use it upon yourself, it does proc bleed on you. And with that instance, you actually can turn along to the lot of blood station, and the white boss can actually help proc those buffs. But the best pairing for a skill like this will be with like a scavenger's curve sword or a cross the pinata, as it do get a passive bleed and a best head with those cold infusions. Number 43, we have Killing Mist. Now this skill is not meant to be a primary option by any means, because all it does serve is as like a weapon buff, and if you want to make your weapon cold infused or require a different build, reflecting to intelligence, you're going to have access to buff anyway. But the whole purpose of this skill, in my opinion, is to just be slapped onto a dagger and paired alongside any build that doesn't already have access to frost. So like a strength-based build, arcane build, you just benefit of using Killing Mist, because you can just lit up the boss fight with this active ore slapped onto a dagger, and then you actually end up debuffing them, make them take 10% damage, and make them take 20% more damage over the next 20 seconds. Now if you actually were going to go the fire-based build, I wouldn't bother with Killing Mist, because obviously the fire is going to reset the frost, and we don't want that. But if you do feel like you are lacking some damage against bosses, I'd honestly give Killing Mist a go. Number 42, Carrion Vancover, which is a magic-based skill, very similar to how I saw the Carrion Greatsword. This one is just going to be the better version because it can be charged up a third time and it's doing monstrous amounts of damage. Really good stance damage, it can go really far as well. Like as long as you have the opening to use a skill like this, it can just destroy every single boss in the game. And the only reason why it's going to get low off the list is because it is eventually outclassed by Carrion Sovereignty. But yes, you do get into the DLC and basically into the game, but it is the better version. So in the base game, I'll do something like this, and then just eventually...
Really? You're touching a $9 million contract.
This is a very good multi-hit type of skill. It has put some nice amounts of damage, probably best head alongside some status effect types of builds. Now this actually does have two different variants. There's one for like larger weapons like Great Swords and Halberd, and there's one for like the small weapons like Curved Swords and Katanas. Now I definitely prefer the quicker based version instead, as it just does have much quicker animations, and it has benefits of this better status effect build-up due to its faster animations. And for the most part, if I want to use it for things like Curved Swords and Katanas, it would only be if I'm going to fall into its status effect. Because for the most part, if you're using a Katana, I think Unsheath is a much better option, and with the Curved Sword, I think things like Spinning Slash is a better option, because they also just to give you the ability to get some nice stance breaks. But with Double Slash, it does actually swing a bit faster, so it's probably better for those status builds, but I think that's going to be its only use, because of every other different weapon type, I don't really value it as much. Number 40, Assassin's Gambit, which this is probably the best stealth-based tool in the entire game. It makes your character partially invisible and silences footsteps, and to the point that you can just go through entire like legacy dungeons without even being spotted at all. Even if you try and like run and sprint through them, a lot of enemies will not be eyebrow. Like this thing is genuinely amazing. I always recommend just having Assassin's Gambit just slapped onto a really light weapon. Just leave it in your inventory in any single instance where you feel like you need to stealth past some enemies because you're low health and there's a bunch of challenging enemies up ahead. You could just use something like this. Also, it is very handy in just like challenge runs in general, but even in just like regular playthroughs, I definitely find lots of value in this. Number 39, Horrorluth's Earthshaker. Now, out of all like the strength-based AoE attacks, I consider this one to be the best one, as it does just get you amazing amounts of damage and just really good stance damage. Like the entire skill can easily do like over 40 to 50 stance damage, and it can just be amazing, especially if you have a long enough opening. You also get lots of high armor. It can stun up with like the initial roar attack. Like it's just really good. Any single time you're surrounded by a bunch of trash mobs, this thing can just split them out full easily. And I think the best part about it is that it can be paired with basically every single weapon. You can slap it onto a dagger, colossal weapon, even a whip. Like this thing is really just that good. Now it does just only scale up the strength stats, which I kind of would like to pair this alongside smaller types weapons, because with large weapons, you already get access to really good stance damage anyway. So we are better pairing with things like potentially curved swords, daggers, maybe even thrusting swords. But you're going to have to go into a strength build just to be able to use something like this. And also it does have a real long animation, so it's not going to be the most useful thing in most parts of the game, but it still is deserving of a very solid A tier. Number 38, Aspect of the Crucible Wings. Now there are two different variants of this skill. There is one that actually does a poking attack, and another one with the twin blades that actually does this flurry attack. Now as for the poking attack one, I kind of see it similar to how I see things like Piercing Fang and Impaling Thrust, in that it's like a lunging based poke. Now this one is like the slow version of Impaling Thrust and Piercing Fang. It actually does lunging really far, but it actually does do more damage in a longer animation. Now, I probably still consider things like Piercing Fang and Impaling Thrust to be better, because those ones have much faster animations and actually can just do more stance damage too. But Crucible Wings can be infused onto a Colossal Sword, which is actually very interesting because they don't really get as many poking attack types of options. They only really get things like Giant Hunt, which is actually really good, but this one can actually lunge in really far, do some okay amounts of damage, but with this long animation, it might be a bit too risky. Now, as for the Twin Blade version, I probably don't really like this one as much unless I'm fighting like larger types of enemies, because against smaller enemies, it can just like overshoot the targets and then like half the attacks are just going to miss and it do really bad damage. But when you pair it alongside status effects, mainly being Blood Flame Blade, actually can do some nice damage. I kind of wish there was like an infusible Twin Blade that had passive blade. It would have made for a much better pairing. But for the most part, this type of playstyle might still be outclassed by things like a charged heavy attack build or a power stance jumping attack build that the Twin Blades have. But it still is really cool to have, and against some bosses actually can make very quick work of them too. Number 37, Shriek of Sorrow, which is a weapon buff skill that you do get in the DLC, and upon using it, it actually does boost your damage by 10%. Now the thing is, the lower health that you go, the more damage you actually do receive. And it's to the point that when you're below 25% health, you get a 30% damage boost, which is by far like the best damage buff if you don't include things like Determination and Roll Not Resolve, because those are only for this one hit. But for an extended period of time, it doesn't really get much better than this, like 30% more damage for your weapons in the last 40 seconds in a really quick animation. It's really good. Now obviously it has to be like very situational, because it's only beneficial what you do get at like lower levels. Otherwise you just use things like Crag Blade instead. But a good thing is that when you are at these lower levels and use the skill, you can just heal with your flask and still retain the same amount of buff. Now even then, I would probably still use things like Crag Blade, because it lasts longer, it gives you like a flat 50%, you don't have to worry about like casting it at lower health, which might be a bit more risky. It also boosts your stance damage as well, and it still is a physical damaging buff, which is the same thing as Shriek of Sorrow. But Shriek of Sorrow is still going to get this high, but the main reason that there's actually a lot of weapons, specifically in the DLC, that can't be buffed with the Crag Blade, but can be buffed with this. So all like the Smith script weapons, they can't be buffed with Crag Blade. Things like your hand-to-hand art, they also cannot be buffed. The Golem Fists, the only way to actually get a weapon buff with these types of weapons is to use something like Shriek of Sorrow. So like it is going to be very useful for these types of things, but for the most part, I think Crag Blade is the better option. As number 36, Sacred Blade. This is a holy-based projectile attack, does come out pretty fast, does do some nice damage, it's very easy to use, not that expensive. Also does boost your weapon with this 80 more holy damage for like the next 40 seconds, which is really nice, and you can get it very early on in the game. Now the thing is, holy damage throughout the base game, not going to be the most useful thing, but thankfully in the DLC, there are a bunch more enemies that are weaker to it, and there are just different types of buffs that you can pair alongside with this to just make it do even more damage. But the thing is, with faith-based builds, you always just want to go back and forth between Sacred Infusions and Flamebound Infusions, depending on which boss that you do fight. And I think Sacred Blade is just the best Sacred-based skill. A lot of weapons can use it, and if you wanted to go with these Sacred Infusions, I would just slap on this thing. Number 35, Spinning Gravity Thrust. Now, if the Millennia's Great Throne was more accessible, I would honestly put this bad boy into the S tier, because this thing can just output monstrous amounts of damage. You can put it onto a Colossal Sword, which is just crazy. Obviously, get access to piercing damage, get really good status build-up, good stance damage, it can send enemies flying. Now, like the major downside is that you get stuck in a really long animation. Specifically, that first part, the recovery frames are really long. It takes forever to land to the ground. And it's to the point that if you just do the follow-up attack, it might honestly just be a bit faster, and you're just going to benefit from it. Now, the entire FK cost might be a bit too high, but again, still that long animation is what's going to hurt it. Hence me saying that Millennia's Great Throne is going to be an amazing pairing, because pairing alongside this makes it perfect. You get all your health back instantly, and you can train with every single boss due to its infinite hype drama. So against some small enemies that can be staggered, it's probably going to be more useful, but against larger bosses that are going to keep you throughout the entire animation, I probably wouldn't use it unless I do have the Millennia's Great Throne. Number 34, Swift Slap. Now this is a skill of the backhand blades, and unfortunately it has gotten nerfed to the point where I no longer consider it to be an S tier, and it also in the bug alongside with this, that stops me from putting it higher as well. Now the skill still moves really far, not as far as it used to, but if it's far enough, it will still be a good option. Obviously only when fully charged, and when fully charged, it actually hits multiple times and actually helps proc status effects pretty quickly. Does some decent damage. You actually can use it as like a mix-up. If you feel like you're going to attack into danger, you can like redirect it and just dodge back into safety again. It does work pretty well. Now unfortunately, this fully charged effect is actually somewhat bugged as well. Specifically against larger bosses, sometimes the after shockwave effect just completely misses, and you're only doing like half the amount of damage, which is like very frustrating because you want to use it fully charged in most cases to maximize the damage and maximize the stance damage, and you're just missing out on a whole bunch of it. So if that actually did get fixed, it might end up being a bit higher, but as it stands right now, it's probably not the best option for the backhand blades. Number 33, vacuum slice. If you're using a colossal sword and you feel like you're lacking a projectile option, I would honestly go with vacuum slice. Now it's not going to do as well as things like Stormblade, because Stormblade can go just as far, but be faster, actually probably end up doing higher DPS, be cheaper as well, actually track upwards, whereas vacuum slice does not, and those things can be boosted by the in-range Divine Beast talisman, but vacuum slice can be used onto a colossal sword, whereas Stormblades cannot. So this is going to be the best projectile option, and it still is really good. It goes relatively far. It does do more damage and more stance damage in one hit than things like Stormblade would. It still actually gets a hitbox at closer range. The hitboxes themselves for the projectile attack might be a bit weird. If you fight on like some like weird terrain, the projectile can just like vanish and just disappear, and it's not end up hitting the target, which might be a bit frustrating. But it still is an otherwise amazing option for the colossal swords. Might not be as good as things like Lion's Claw and whatnot, but the projectile can make it very easy to use. Number 32, Endure, which is definitely one of the more underrated skills in the game, and if you were having problems like reading enemies' movesets, and you didn't get to memorize them at all, and you just want to face tank and just trade out, Endure is probably going to be the option for you, because not only does this thing give you immense amounts of poise, but it also gives you 45% damage negation across the board to every single damage type. Now the skill only does last 3 seconds, but thankfully it is actually a really quick animation, and doesn't consume much FP. Now for larger types of weapons, I wouldn't really care for it, because larger weapons already get hyper armor, and actually in a longer animation, and with like the slower attacks, it might not be the best thing, but definitely best pairs alongside some smaller types of weapons, things like fists or curved swords, straight swords, doesn't matter what it is, this could be a very solid pick. But yeah, if you were struggling to actually engage with bosses or struggling to get particular types of spells off that didn't get hyper armor, you could just use Endure first and just have at the boss and just probably end up winning the engagement. Number 31, Spectral Lens, which is a polearm-based skill. It's a projectile that does scale up Arcane, which might make it a bit limited, but thankfully Arcane builds are still good. Now the reasons why I consider this to be a high A tier is because it's a projectile attack that goes really far. It actually has tracking. It tries to track towards the head, which when you get headshots, you just do bonus damage and bonus stance damage, which is probably the best part about this skill, and its stance damage, because it does at least 25 stance damage, which doing 25 stance damage at these further distances is honestly just ridiculous. You could also pair it alongside the Arrow Race Talisman for it to go even further. It works with the Smithing Talisman too to make it do more damage, and it only consumes 9 FP, which is just absurd. Now I don't think it's the most broken thing, because I think the damage is definitely a bit on the lower end. It could use a little bit more, which you could like fully charge it, that would have been nice, would have definitely helped out in the damage department, but I think that's the only downside, and otherwise just an amazing skill. Number 30, Phantom Slash, which this is a pole blade based skill that actually does double as both a projectile attack and like some lunging based attack. It actually does shoot out the Phantom, then you both follow it, and you actually do get an option of a follow-up attack as well. Like the entire combo can do some really nice damage. You don't really get as much hyper armor, nor is the stance damage really that's good either, but it actually does have a bunch of things going for it. And that one, it is very efficient. 2, even if you do get staggered, the Phantom is actually guaranteed to come out, and the skill ceiling is actually really high with a skill like this, because you actually can just shoot the Phantom into one direction, and you can actually like dodge yourself into safety, or you actually can hit multiple enemies at once, because you can have the Phantom hit one, and you can hit another, and you can also have like the follow-up attack redirect too. So like the skill ceiling of this skill is actually really high, and actually it's really fun to use. Might not be like the best thing in the game, but I still is deserving of an A tier. Number 29, Divine Beast Frost Stomp, which this is like the upgraded version of Whole Frost Stomp, in that it is like a cold-based AoE, and cold-based skills do scale up both dexterity and intelligence. And with an intelligence-based build, I wouldn't really care for it much, because with your sorceries, you already have access to like AoEs and frost-based skills, while with the dexterity build, it can actually be very good, because you already have access to both of these things. So with Divine Beast Frost Stomp, with how easy it is to use, the fact that it can be fully charged, it's good for frost build-up, but paired alongside the stomping-based boss, can actually output some nice amounts of damage. And I think best of all yet, you can pair with basically every single weapon type in the entire game. It's probably not going to be like the best option if you have the ability to use things like Ice Spear. That just might be the better frost-based skill, and there are probably other different skills in the game that can just output more damage. But as having a nice AoE option that's as easy to use as this one, you can't really go wrong.
Introducing Virtual Up, the latest innovation from Nespresso. It's innovation you can touch, sense, taste. In every single cup, your coffee, your way. Nespresso.
This
start of every year, I find myself wondering again, constantly questioning life's mysteries.
Number 28, Spinning Slash. Now there are 3 different variants of this skill, one for polearms, one for large weapons like curved greatswords, and there's one for small weapons like straight swords, curved swords, katanas, things like that. And I think the smaller and quicker based skill of Spinning Slash is going to be best, because with a larger types of weapons, they play better with other different types of skills like Stormcaller and whatnot. But for Spinning Slash, there really isn't anything that's too comparable that the small weapons already have. Now, if I do have like a katana or a straight sword, I'm probably better off having things like Unsheathed, as well as like power stancing, really quick dexterity weapons, but it can be like a nice skill alternative, especially if you are using things like axes, which sort of without really good power stance combo. But yeah, probably like the best skill in terms of damage or stance breaking, but it still sort of helps in different areas. That's number 27, Stormcaller. I'll do up until this skill by 4, so I'll give you a bit of a comparing of a lot of different types of spinning-based skills. And I do think these large weapons, this is probably going to be the one that is best for the playthrough, because it's one style like only sword and by the knights or like Millennia, this thing can just straight up pretty reliable. Right? This is a stun locking tool, and it can just upgrade a lot of damage, especially alongside taking the range to one boost power spin, and it can watch that effect spread through to it's just amazing. Inside enemies that cannot be targeted, for this one, we're going to get started on the recommendation. First, basically, this is start here with the game next stage. There's still a lot of things like spinning strikes, where you can kind of cancel every single part of the attack, and also doesn't get runner as well. There's like this ball versatility, it's pretty very close to weaknesses. So, Stormcaller, maybe on this 2 consider to be like a simple but that's multi playthrough. There are just a lot of features where it's not going to be that useful and good to have. Number 26, Black Flames Tornado, which is a hard skill, was going to scale primarily off fade, and it needs to like a heavily attack that is served in a boss position. You don't necessarily need to actually go into fade, just deal good damage. This thing can just melt them due to its Black Flame properties, becomes 2% damage per time. It's been in a quick session, over like a few second period that if you use the skill, a lot of bosses actually use one of the oceans, and just get destroyed. That is if you get a lot of ocean. Some bosses like the staggered hours, obviously not going to be that useful of a skill, and unfortunately in the DLC, Black Flame and Death and Death have been nerfed to the point where it's like half as effective. Some bosses even exposed is less effective, so I wouldn't really bother using it in the DLC. That's probably the main reason why I'm still not put it into S tier, because even though it can destroy a lot of bosses, it's probably just going to be for the base game. Number 25, One Spot. This is a skill of the backhand blade. Doesn't help when you dodge directly for the quick poking attack. Being able to just dodge and just directly attack right afterwards is most likely going to end up being a counter hit, because enemies are placed still in the middle of their attack combos, which means you're going to get a whole bunch more damage with a skill like this, which might be like one of its downsides, because it doesn't put that much damage, but it is really cheap, it's easy to use, it can choose a whole bunch of slower enemies, and stuff like that, especially if they are using shields, but it's going to just completely bypass skills at that. Now the thing that's not good for the individual this team is one, it's going to be that most amazing thing. It's not going to be that good of a skill in the five type of bosses, it's like really useless there. And also does seem to get the stamina, you don't know if it's being like great in this back to back, to be really stamina, that's not something you can continuously step up from like other different types of skills, but it's still deserving of a high HP. This stuff is best of the best, and it's probably the second for the skipping forward, so there's anything really effective, anything less than broken. There's better one that really good. Interesting stuff in the list. You guys just skip the entire video. I'm kidding, you guys are fine. Thanks, sir. Take the stuff back anyway. I appreciate it. I'd like to get started with number 24, and the questions we have the Poison Flower Blooms Twice, which is a direct upgrade of the Poison Multiplied skill, and that when you actually use it, it's from the poison, there's a really good poison effect, but not as much as the damage, 5% damage. It's just so much fucking poison, using the skill for a little bit of damage. It's like a worse way to play in my opinion. But thankfully, the Poison Flower Blooms is a big small benefit, because the skill itself is actually really good. It punches really far, and it's really good with upgrade frames. It does piercing damage, and it also is the only visual and encounter that's 10 buck rocks. Every single hit does roughly 140 buck build-up. So actually with a few hits, you can drop bucks on most boss in the game, which is really good. Now one potential downside is that when you actually use the skill where your enemy is flooded, it also removes it as well, which you kind of don't want to remove rot, because one is actually great. Unlike poison, so it might be a downside. And then pretty cool if you get in the first poison, you'll do like twice as much damage, but that doesn't really work that way. So that is a bit of a missed opportunity, but this still can actually be used for almost every single one type in the game. The very helpful paramedic to use like the venomous thing within like open fusion, because you also want to have this skill alongside the weapon that does pop poison really quickly, but you also want to have the lost point on him, because this skill does primarily scale. That's that. So the combination of just makes sense. Optimal venomous thing is with a calculated fusion of life extending, but this skill does offer a range. With a 10 barrel bar into the way of the enemy's lightning heads, gives you access to rot, gives you access to piercing down, and also use just like one shot, it feels like running towards them instead of damage, but that's not fatal. Number 23 of Flame Strike with the fire against still does scale up strength, none of this goes to the Vancover 14, so the full up strike with death of this scale up beyond good most damage and much of the hit count is going to come off that. The third part of this kind of uses to like stun off their skill rate, and this body should be still a little bit of damage, a little bit of chip damage, it goes pretty nice in some cases. Not going to go as far as things like Flame of the Red Pain, but the whole best part about it is that full up strike, it can lung in really far, stagger enemies really nicely, and actually does bump roughly more fire damage, roughly 40 seconds, which is really good. Now, I don't think it's as good as things like Flame Speed, but you get Flame through everyone in DLC, and not just going to scale and base that as well. But the reason why I consider it to be better is because you can fully charge it, make it do more damage, you can buff weapons faster, and actually give you a bit more damage as well. But this one is honestly just as good in my opinion. Number 22, Piercing Thing, which is one of the best poking attack skills in the game. This thing is lunging really far, be pretty quick, do some most things that like this is very easy to use. And lots of different type weapons like thrusting swords, heavy thrusting swords, great speed. They can just be an amazing option. Now, I do think that Impairing Thrust is the better option because Impairing Thrust is a lot quicker, it's cheaper, and it does the exact same stamp damage. Like the speeds are faster, but it's not much damage, so this makes more sense to me. But Piercing Thing does have its using a bit of a launch spreader, helps do a bit more damage. And also has better tracking. It feels like 180 with Piercing Thing. Whereas the Impairing Thrust doesn't really have that good at tracking, so maybe it's a bit easy to do something like this. But if you get a bit more experience in the game, maybe Impairing Thrust is a better option. Number 21, Graduate War. The shift is a lot of the database, but not the I will touch on. And I consider this one to be the best because this gives you extra. It gives you a 10% damage boost, 10% defense boost, and actually gives you like 10% touching speed, or possibly speed that with the attack change boost, which the heavy attack change for the most part, but don't really care for much because it's not makes it especially heavy attack longer, anything not going to stay straight as fast as it would with the regular heavy attack, but there can be some times, specifically the ones with the full arms, but they're going to be really good. Maybe with the ones that are great spear or a halberd, you can just do like amazing damage. And then ones like things like the Roll Medallion, Iron Medallions, the 2 most powerful, you're just doing 1% amount of damage. It could be a decent power stance option too, because the effects are just better stat. You're just going to have one in one hit and one on the other, and just be able to get a bunch more defenses, much more stamina recovery speed. It's not going to give you as much of a damage boost as things like Front Wave, but there's extra benefits might just be able to be the better option in some cases. Number 20, we have the Barricade Shield, which this is like the best shield-based actual warrior in the game, and this thing just makes a lot of different positions on the shield that is good. If you're having problems with dodging these movesets, just slap on any shield and slap on a Barricade Shield and do that if you fine. You don't necessarily have to have a great shield to be able to gain massive amounts of guard boost, and just not be able to like destroy your entire stamina them. So this actually working very well to do that. And especially now, with the recent patches, the medium shields have actually gotten a pretty decent bump in terms of guard boost. Barricade Shield can just make that be a double effect, and you're just not going to take much damage at all. You're going to take a lot less stamina damage, and you have a bunch more targets on top of that, so only attacks can deflect off a lot more than they normally would. And first of all, yes, this skill is very cheap, it's a fast animation, and it lasts for 10 seconds too. Like, this thing is amazing. Number 19, Spinning Strike. Now, as I mentioned with Stormcrawler, when you're fighting enemies that can be staggered, that one's probably the better option. But the enemies that cannot be staggered, I'd rather use Spinning Strikes because you don't get stuck in that longer animation. Now, this is just a full-on kind of skill, so if you are using things like a Great Hammer or a Great Axe, you probably have to go in a different direction, probably without flexing going through that direction. The reason why I still value Spinning Strikes in full one is because you can output a lot of DPS, and also it can be cancelled out in every single swing. It plays very well with stat specs, so it's something like a Blood Flame Blade Graveside can actually make for an amazing carry, and you actually do get more inputs as well, so actually can stagger enemies pretty well, and do a decent amount of stance damage. The major downside of this skill is you don't really get high drama, but if you do find your own niche in this skill, it can be extremely deadly. Number 18, Palm Blast. Now this skill I consider to be the best for the in art, and I think this complements them perfectly, because the moveset typically is a bunch of like quick attacks, you don't really get much stance damage, you're not going to get any high drama, but Palm Blast definitely does build that niche for the weapon moveset, as you're not going to be able to get staggered out of the attack at all, especially when fully charged. It's going to do a trade out, do amazing damage, it's really high stance damage, and if you can start that long range animation, you can just do that fully charging attack. And there's pretty much in the sense there's a lot of different types of bosses, also the uncharged version is basically useless as well. But in the instant, finishing the moveset, that's why I do consider it to be like a good compliment, but it's still a very well to treat a lot of different things. It gets set case for and it gets figured out. The AoE actually doesn't change relatively much, like some like medium range projectile attack, and it's going to do amazing stance damage. Number 17, Prayerful Strike, which is definitely one of the more underrated passions of war in the entire game. It can be a skill that you equip with like hammers or like larger types of weapons, and upon hitting an enemy, you're getting 30% of your health back. And this doesn't necessarily do any particular type of damage. It is like a sacred based skill, so you're not limited as the one infusion, but you can pair it alongside a heavy infusion and just do just straight up raw physical damage, and also with large types of weapons, it can do over 35 stance damage as well. You get amazing high drama, like any single time that you just need a bunch of health. You can just use a skill like this one. You can just have it sitting in your back pocket, maybe for power sensing. It could be your offhand option. You can just very well just leave it as your primary option too, and just trade out with every single boss. Like it is just that good. Number 16, Royal Knight's Resolve, which is one of the best weapon buffs in the game. This thing gives you an 80% damage boost to all of your weapons. Now the effect does wear off upon hitting enemy once, but you only need to hit an enemy once for most different types of builds that pertain to this large heavy weapons. The things like heavy attack builds, guard counter builds, potentially jumping attack builds. This might be one of the best weapon buffs to use. There's a lot of different types of enemies and bosses that can just be destroyed. Now, for the most part, with these types of shields, you're probably going to go second to more stance broken type of things, and I think Crack Blade is going to be the better option, because Crack Blade does only boost your damage by 15%, but it lasts 60 seconds. You have to keep reapplying it over and over again, so it's a lot more efficient, and it also boosts your stance damage by 10%. So with these types of builds, I think this one is the better option, but Royal Knight's Resolve obviously can just do more damage, and it also boosts all of your damage types, whereas Crack Blade only boosts physical damage, so it does have its uses. It's probably still thinking it's a bit out of class, and it still is something of an estate. Number 15, Wild Strikes, which is definitely one of the best hard-hitting skills in the entire game. I recommend pairing this one alongside some large types of weapons, because you can do that. You can build on things like great hammers and great axes, and just end up doing amazing damage. Every single swing is only 2 FP. You get a lot of high drama in it. You're going to trade out with a lot of different bosses. You get like some status effect builds that can pair nicely as well. A good pair would be like with a rusted anchor, because every single swing is going to do piercing damage, and with that really good high drama, a lot of attacks might end up resulting in a counter attack, and you can just output amazing damage, and you also just get the option of a follow-up attack. With a light and heavy can result in a high stance damaging attack. Also doesn't really consume much MP as well. Like the entire company is really good, and I consider this skill to just be one of the best ones. It's probably not going to do like the easiest thing to use in most cases, and sometimes if you just don't have a long opening, I probably wouldn't really bother using it many times, but it still is something I'm going to test it. And it's number 14, Flame Spear, which I consider this one to be the slight bit upgraded version of the Flaming Strike, and then it does work as like a fire-based attack that can buff your weapon. Now, Flame Spear can actually be equipped on things like Colossal Sword, which is going to be one of the main reasons why it's valued a lot, and it is going to be a poking attack that can be fully charged. It can actually go really far distances, and actually just do amazing damage at that as well. And the fact that it can be buffed with only just one little small poking attack means that the animation is not that long for it to actually be buffed. So when you are making a faith-based build with an infused weapon, you kind of go back and forth between Flame Arts and Sacred, and every single time that they're going to do the Flame Arts infusion, I'm more likely than not going to be using Flame Spear. Number 13, Carrying Sovereignty. As I mentioned with things like carrying Grandor and carrying Greatsword, this one is going to be like the beefed up version of those skills, because it can just be charged a couple times and it's end up doing way more damage, way more stance damage, and gives you the option of a follow-up attack, which is a follow-up attack can come out really fast, and for some reason this also comes fully charged as well, and the entire combo can do like 90-30 stance damage, which is just absurd. It does take a little bit to be able to charge up, so there's a lot of different bosses, maybe in a DLC, not going to be the best thing to use. You could also just pair alongside things like the Stone Bark tip, and it's inevitably do over 120 stance damage with the entire combo, which can like probably stand break a lot of bosses just in regular new game. Now, one downside is obviously going to be a slow animation, and it doesn't really get any hype drama unless you pair it alongside large type weapons like great swords or breaks katanas, curve break swords, things like that, you can get a nice amount of height drama. But against bosses that is going to hit you really hard, that doesn't really make much of a difference. So there's certain circumstances where it's not going to be like the best thing to use, but it's still considered to be one of the best skills in the entire game. Number 12, we have Giant Hunt, which is that poking attack skill, so that we have to compete with things like Impaling Thrust and Piercing thing. And for the most part, I probably don't value them as much, because those skills can launch further, have a faster animation, and do just as much stance damage, but Giant Hunt can be infused onto the Water Sword, so the other skills cannot be. And with this Water Sword build, it might make one of the better pairings. Honestly, Giant Hunt might be better than Lion's Claw in some cases too. It can do more damage, it's going to do the better damage type, it can send enemies flying into the air, it's going to do just as much damage as Lion's Claw too in that faster animation. But Lion's Claw obviously beat out things like Lion's Claw. Number 11, Blood Tax. Now, as I was mentioning with Repeating Thrust, this is basically the identical animation. Does that like 4 hitting floating attack, that little pirouette swing. It can stun lock so many different types of smaller enemies, infinite stun lock paired alongside Status Effect build. It is going to be broken, but actually can paired alongside things like the Great Katana, all of Sword Lands. It honestly just busted. Like it can do this for ridiculous amounts of damage with a build like this. Now, Repeating Thrust does actually give more damage than Blood Tax, but Blood Tax actually does give you the ability So you get a whole bunch of health regen, and the entire combo can very well do almost 20% of your entire health bar in just a short amount of time. It also just gives you a whole bunch of like status effect build up too. Like it's genuinely really good. And it's to the point that I just want to use blood types almost every single time, despite it getting less damage. But it also actually does receive a boost with the Enhanced Spark set, which actually can boost it by roughly 12% more damage. And with the entire set equipped, it can roughly do almost just as much damage as Repeating Thrust. So one of the only downsides that blood types might have against Repeating Thrust is probably just counteracted anyway. Number 10, Impaling Thrust. Now this skill I consider to be the best attack skill in the entire game. It's incredibly quick, really cheap, does amazing stance damage. In fact, does as much stance damage as state of like a piercing tank weapon would do. You can put it on so many different weapon types like great swords, great spears, thrusting swords, heavy thrusting swords. There's so many different options you can put it on, and it just makes every single one and just an amazing pairing because it can just do really good damage in a really short amount of time. And a lot of different enemies are just going to be displaced by it. Number 9, Bloodblade, what I consider the best blade skill in the entire game, is an arcane-based projectile attack, very similar to something like the Rejuvier is, but I consider this one to be the better version because you just can get more damage due to be able to pair it alongside large type weapons, things like curved swords or katanas, and it actually does like a hitbox at closer ranges. So you're just doing so much more bleed build up, so much more damage, and you do have like the effect of just taking a little bit of health, but it's only on the first intro cast, so with consecutive spamming, you're not going to lose any type of health whatsoever, and it's also going to give you like half the amount of MP compared to Rejuvier, gives you a lot less stamina, and it's potentially just do more stance damage too. Now it's probably not going to be useful against enemies that cannot bleed out, but against enemies that can be susceptible to bleed, this is going to be one of the best skills to use. If you have like an occult infused like another Keeper or Scavenger's Curve Sword, just slap on things like Bloodblade and every single one of those enemies are dying. Number 8, we have Square Off, and at number 7, we have Punch Sheet. I might as well talk about both of these skills at the exact same time because they're both stance-based skills that are just specific to their own weapon types. Square Off being for the straight sword and Punch Sheet being for the katana. And the reason why both of these are amazing is because they're incredibly cheap, really quick, and it outputs ridiculous amounts of stance damage. Like the Square Off skill gets you 40 stance damage with like a heavy attack. It might be like a slight longer animation, but it's like a nice lunge. That'll do piercing damage, and 40 stance damage is like more so than like a Colossal Sword charged heavy attack. Like that is an absurd amount of stance damage that you get with just a straight sword. Like that just takes the only downside that these small types weapons have, and just like flips them on their head. And this very true Punch Sheet as well. This heavy attack, which comes out in almost an instant, does 30 stance damage, and you can like basically cancel the recovery animations with like a crouch or a roll, and just continuously spam it over and over again. Which probably the main reason why I prefer Punch Sheet over Square Off is because katanas typically just have more range, they're going to get access to bleed, and you just got to be able to spam it over and over again very quickly. But Square Off also does have that light attack version, which also does 30 stance damage, and also can be a very quick animation. So like it doesn't really matter which one you use. I just think that if you're going to have a katana or a great sword, that's going to be the options that I pair alongside with them. Number 6, Ice Spear, which is one of the best magic projectiles in the entire game. It is a cold-based skill, therefore it can scale with both dexterity and intelligence. Now, when you do have an intelligence skill, you're really going to have access to like frost-based spells and some magic-based spells anyway. So I think this is going to pair best alongside that dexterity type build, and being able to have magic damage with a dexterity skill that can proc frost very quickly can be very beneficial. Also, this could lead into like a cold infusion and at maximum levels, feeling you can get scaling in both things.
Of course.
And maximize damage that way as well.
Of course, is this when huge and in Minnesota Wild.
Really cheap, it's a good cost, and it does ridiculous mass damage. Like, it's really good damage, good stance damage. It procs frost faster than almost any other projectile in the game. Like, it's just incredible. Number 5, Golden Bow. To what I consider probably the most useful Astral Ward in the entire game. Now, most of my Astral Ward ranking lists in the past have put Golden Bow as number 1, but for the sake of just having more fun with this list this time, I'm just going to slap it at number 5, even though I just use Golden Bow Astral Ward in almost every single build, except for a Faith build, which is like the only instance where I wouldn't use this, because with a Faith build, you're able to have access to the spell-based version, which that version is just like direct upgrade. But the Golden Bow Astral Ward uses it for every other different type of build: strength, dexterity, intelligence, arcane. Just slap Golden Bow onto a dagger. You get it right at the beginning of the game. Before every single boss fight, just use the skill, and for the next 45 seconds, you just get a bunch of damage, and you get a bunch of defenses, and it's going to be with it's going to do amazing damage. And the reasons why it's so good is because it can stagger really well, you can spam it over and over again, and with consecutive casts, it's actually pretty cheap, only like 6 or 7 FP with every single cast. It also does get a hitbox at closer ranges, so if you're using like larger weapons like a Great Katana or a Curved Greatsword, you're doing amazing damage. It could also just prop those status effects quickly at these closer ranges, and as of the DLC, it can be boosted by things like the Enraged Divine Beast Talisman and the Divine Beast Helmet. You can just get amazing damage with a build like this. And as I always mentioned, projectile attacks just cheese the entire game. It doesn't matter what point of the game that you're in, they're just always going to be amazing because it means you don't have to engage with enemies. If enemies like to move or dodge around, it'll be high up in the air. It's going to be a direct counter to them as well, and it doesn't really get much better.
We had a Crime Stopper tip come in. We walked into a real one tonight. How much you said? For 20.
Stormblade. Number 3, we have a Wing Stance. To what I consider the best of all these stance-based Ashes of War, this one infusible onto the Milady, and the reason why I consider it to be broken and the best one is because both of its stance-based skills are just insane. It has the flowing attack, which you can spam over and over again. It can stun up all these smaller types of enemies, all these knights and omens, which otherwise, like your regular moveset of the light greatsword, cannot really do that. And it also gets the option of that poking attack, which is poking attack does like 30 stance damage. It lunges in really far. It's like having like spinning slash and like piercing thing infused into one weapon, and you can also just get more damage. And you can combo them directly back and forth. Like you can just go with the flurry attack skill and then go directly into the poking attack. And also, there is the existence of the Rolana's cameo, which I didn't really mention with Unsheath and Square Off, which typically with those skills, I don't really care to use them alongside that talisman as much. I also always have it equipped, but you just always want to keep spamming with those skills over and over again, but you actually benefit a lot more with the Rolana's cameo with the wing stance than you otherwise would with the other different types of skills. And the main reason being is because when you have it fully charged and you use like the light attack version and you keep spamming the flurry attack, it's actually not going to remove the buff at all, because normally with the talisman, once you use the skill once, it removes the buff completely, but you can just keep spamming it over and over, and it's not going to end until you end the combo, or you just actually get hit or staggered out of it. So yeah, this skill literally gets everything that you need. It can lunge really far, it can stun lock, amazing stance damage, for barely any FP and stamina cost. Number 2, Crack Blade, which is probably the best weapon buff in the entire game. I blaze this like every single day. It's just amazing. It's a weapon buff that actually gives you 15% more physical damage and 10% more stance damage for 60 seconds. So any single time that you're going to go like a charged heavy attack build, a jumping attack build, this light attack spam, guard counterings, I think Crack Blade is like the option. And these builds have just only gotten better every time due to things like the 2-headed talisman, the deflecting tier. Like you can make broken builds with every single one of these types, and Crack Blade is just at the center of it. You can just get way more stance damage and just way more damage to all of your builds. Now, it might not be the most versatile thing because it only does boost physical damage. So when you are going to go with like these elemental types of builds, I probably wouldn't use Crack Blade, and I might use things like Roll Knight Resolve instead. But that one you actually have to keep buffing it over and over again. And that is like the convenience of Crack Blade. Just use the buff one time, you have it for 60 seconds, and you're just going to benefit of more damage and more stance damage. And that's number 1, I'm sure to nobody's surprise, we have Lion's Claw, the single most brain-dead skill in the entire game, probably outside of like Taker's Flame off the Blasphemous Blade. This thing just requires 0 skill at all. You can put it onto like basically any single weapon, you just click the button over and over again, and it does not matter. Everything is just going to die. You do this really quick front flipping attack that is basically impossible to get staggered out of. Infinite type armor, amazing stance damage, it flattens smaller enemies to the ground so you can just keep stun locking them over and over again. You get pretty good hitboxes, it lunges pretty far, doesn't really consume that much FP as well, like it is just ridiculous. It's probably not going to be like the most optimal option in terms of like DPS or like being able to stance break as fast, but it doesn't really get much better in terms of ease of use than it does with Lion's Claw. It's over. It's finally done. Oh my god, I never want to do that again until like next week when I actually rank all of the incantations. There's like over 120 or 130 incantations in the entire game, which is literally more than the Ashes of War. So even though I said I'm not going to do it, we're going to do it again. And then we're going to do it again for the sorcerers again later after that, until I end up hating my life. Actually, probably in between those videos, I might make like a ranking of talismans or ranking of crystal tiers. Might do something like that, just a bit smaller, so I actually end up just burning myself out. But yeah, definitely do subscribe for that one, and also follow me on Twitch because I'm live there basically every single day doing a bunch of challenge runs or testing things out to make...
Alright.
So we already made a video about this game yesterday. The Montreal Canadiens scored 2 really late goals to tie this hockey game up 5-5 versus the Ottawa Senators, and then they won in OT. 6-5, the final, for a Habs team that was only able to get 19 shots on goal on the entire night, and a collapse from Ottawa after they had themselves a 5-3 lead to open up the third period, losing in overtime to Cole Caulfield. Now here's the thing. Montreal had 19 shots, they scored 6 goals, which means if you go over to Ottawa Senators goaltender Levi Merilainen, he had himself a .684 save percentage in 60 minutes and 33 seconds of game time. 19 shots, 13 saves, 6 goals against, and 2 on the power play. It was not a good night for one Levi Merilainen, and obviously this is not the ideal scenario for an Ottawa Senators team that looks like this. Merilainen had been playing in Belleville for a good chunk of the year, but he's got 20 Ottawa Senators games played because of how things have shaped up in the crease. You have Linus Ullmark, who is out on personal leave. Merilainen is the backup. You've got Hunter Shepard and Mads Sogard, who had each played a game. And then you've got James Reimer, who is in there too. Merilainen is the backup, technically speaking, but a backup should probably still be able to win you some games, right? Merilainen is 8-10-1 this season, so 8-11 essentially, with these absolutely terrible numbers, and yesterday's loss to the Habs definitely does not help. If you head over to NHL save percentages this season, you will see that Levi Merilainen is second in the league in the lowest save percentage category. Only Samuel Ersson of the Philadelphia Flyers has a lower save percentage with an .855. The games played filter here is over or equal to 14. If we remove that, can we see here? Okay, Matt Sogard had a .688 in his one game that he played. All right, yeah, there are some other goalies that had some terrible numbers, but Merilainen is still amongst the worst here. Which is why, when you look at the game that transpired yesterday, Ottawa blowing the lead at home and losing in overtime to the Habs, you can look at some of these guys and say, damn, they played their heart out. Jake Sanderson scored a goal and 3 assists for 4 total points. And this is what he had to say after the game concluded. I think Levi made some good saves, but at the end of the day, you gotta make more than 10 saves to win a game. Now, a quick correction there, Jake. Yeah, Levi Merilainen did make 10 saves. In fact, he made 13. He got 3 more saves than you're giving him credit for, but oh my goodness, what a bombshell of a quote. Our guy made some good saves, but you gotta make more than 10 saves to win a game. Oh man, Jake Sanderson just called Merilainen out big time. And I wanted to go over some of the commentary from Sens fans about this entire ordeal. Homeboy put up 3 assists and a goal. He has the right to call Levi out. I'm glad someone said it. Leaving Canadian Tire Center tonight was one of the most frustrating experiences in recent memory, having to listen to the Habs chants. 6 goals in 19 shots. 7 in 20 if we count the offside goal. Levi needs to be sent to Belleville. That's as close as you're ever going to hear a team call out their goalie. Levi will be down in Belleville Monday at the latest. If Linus is ready to go, he might be back in Belleville before midnight tonight. Oh, if it was me, I'd have Shepard on the bench and Merilainen would be on his way to Belleville now. No shower, just wear your gear out of the rink. I think he can come back eventually, but the rest of the team needs to see the message that it wasn't on them. And here's the thing, I did watch the Montreal game against Ottawa. Merilainen was not great. These goals that were going in, just the angles and some of the shots that he did save, but they eventually trickled over the line. This is not a good showing for a goaltender that was tasked with 20-plus NHL games this year. And I was kind of saying, Montreal, why don't you shoot more? Merilainen is obviously shaky. The Habs only had 19 shots on the night. But hey, they went out there and they won. So I guess I can't really go out there and complain. Reading some more comments over here. If a quiet guy like Sanderson is saying it, he's truly sick of this crap. The team just said, get us a goalie. Well, we had a goalie. Now we don't for some reason. And we have a really old goalie. Maybe he's good? It's clear the locker room is done with Merilainen. I don't normally like seeing a player call out a teammate in public, but what else can you do at this point? You can't blame these guys for getting frustrated. Look at how hyped up Sandy, Shabby, Greg, and the others were on that fifth goal. They were feeling it, totally ecstatic, only for Levi to just kill the momentum with minutes left and absolutely crap the bed on the game winner. It's got to be an absolute roller coaster of emotions for these guys.
And made a very significant investment in our own delivery fleet. That's our model everywhere across Canada. That does set us apart, for sure. We fleet the regional preferences based on customer interactions. We build our fleet around what our customers require. Safety's in our name. That's what we do.
And finally, there was a post by Spidey Almighty. What are your thoughts on Sanderson calling out the goaltending? Honestly, I have mixed feelings about it. On the one hand, I understand his frustration. Goaltending has not been good enough this year, and Sanderson had a great game. However, Merilainen is young, underqualified backup who's been played a dozen games in a row. He's in a horrible situation, one that he shouldn't even be in. And a lot of the goals that he let in this game are goals that came off huge defensive mistakes that most goalies would let in. Overall, I just don't know what to think. On the one hand, I kind of like that Sandy called out goaltending because it's somewhat cathartic. But at the same time, I don't really know if it was warranted or even helpful given the situation. Top comment says that, yeah, I was stoked about it, but I do agree with you. It's not Levi's fault he's been put in this situation. It's way too much exposure for a young goalie. If he isn't as good as his solid stretch last season, then he's not as bad as he's been playing lately. Ultimately, this is on the GM. First for not identifying the team's positional weakness in goaltending, and then for not proactively addressing it. I agree, XCIX Collective says, but I also kind of wonder what the Sens could do to move or acquire a goalie. As far as I know, in the offseason, they seem fairly set with Allmark as the 1A. The extended absence, plus his poor performances before taking a leave, really seems like an unforeseen circumstance. I'm not trying to absolve GM blame, but I don't know. I don't think it's logical to have stacked another goalie when we could have done the same with a few different positions at the start of the year and didn't. I think unfortunately this is just a rarely encountered issue of running a 1A, 2B situation. Plus, I agree. Mary and Sue are too young to be expected to fill in the case of a long absence, so maybe flipping one of them or keeping Forsberg would have been smart since the Sens window is in the next 5 to 7 years, not the next 10 years. We put all our hope in Allmark, even when last year he didn't show the consistency we had hoped for. So, with all that in mind, it's tough being a Levi Merilainen. The situation is not good, it is not ideal. This is a very unforeseen circumstance for a guy to be thrusted into all these games because of Linus Allmark. But with that said, let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. How do you feel about Jake Sanderson calling the goaltender out and straight up saying that, yeah, buddy, you need to make more saves. You gotta make more than 10 saves to win a game. Levi made 13. But Sanderson's point still stands. The goaltending ruined Ottawa yesterday. You could say that it's been a tough go the entire season long. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. I hope you enjoyed this Fish Show 99. And bye.
There are a total of 37 critical tiers in this game, but I am going to split it up into only 31 different segments because I'm just going to combine the nuts tiers and the shrouding crack tiers as they kind of form the exact same way, and they do have the same talking points, so I'm not going to bother separating them. Now, if you don't know, your crystal tiers can actually be equipped onto your Wanderer's Flask, and you can slot two of them at the same time, and upon drinking this flask, you actually will gain the effects of both crystal tiers, and these effects will be like some special types of buffs that will perform very similar to things like Health Runs, but with a time-based buffs instead. Now, when it does come to ranking them, we are are going to go based on how useful they are. Obviously, every single individual crystal tier might be good for certain types of builds. There isn't like a specific like best crystal tier in the game. So whichever ones are going to be like the most useful for like most different types of builds, they're typically going to get higher on the list. And also there might be some crystal tiers that perform very similar to talismans, but in some instances the talisman versions might be better or the talisman version might be worse. So we're also going to take that into consideration in this ranking video. Starting off at the bottom, the Crimson Sapping Crack tier, which is from the DLC. Now this tier actually does give your character the ability to turn hits into HP, and every single hit does actually give you 0.75% HP, and it does only last 45 seconds, which is just not that good at all. Because even with like the quickest of weapons, at best you're probably going to get around about 40 to 45% of your health back, which while you're only going to be benefiting off this tier if you're just not at max HP. And even in this instance, you could just use the Crimson Crystal tier, and that's going to heal half of your health in an instant. But there are like some specific types of builds out there with like really quick hitting types of skills that could actually give you your health back a lot faster. And even then, if you actually wanted to have some types of health regen for survivability, things like the Crimson Crystal tier is going to be way better because that's a health regen tier that actually lasts for 3 minutes, and you can benefit of that without even having to hit enemies. Like if this thing actually lasted 3 minutes itself, I probably would have had a lot of battle units, but unfortunately that's not the case. Number 13, the Cerulean Crystal tier. Now this tier actually does give you half of your FP bar back, and you can get multiple per playthrough, so putting 2 into 1 drink can actually just refill your entire FP. Now the thing is, your Blue Flask can already do this for you in a faster animation, and the Blue Flask actually heals out a lot of FP, like a plus 12 flask can fully heal an FP bar if you have 37 mind. So this tier is going to be completely outclassed by the Crimson Crystal tier, because obviously a regular Crimson Flask is not going to kill your entire health bar, but the Crimson Crystal tier, you got a couple of them, it actually will. So this one's going to be infinitely more useful. Unless you are like at higher levels where you might want to value more mind to use some healing spells, but even then there are just much better crystal tiers out there.
There's a reason nobody talks about the great inroads.
Number 29, the Crimson Skill Crystal tier, which actually does boost your max HP by 10% for 3 minutes, which obviously is pretty decent, especially if you are at later levels, where you already hit the sub-caps for trigger, and you can just get a decent chunk of HP, and it might result in you just taking an extra attack sometimes. Now the thing is, I'm not going to really value it, because when you use this buff, it actually doesn't regenerate your health. It just increases the HP bar, and you have to use an additional flask just to remain at max HP, so it's essentially useless. You could potentially combine this with things like the Crimson Burst Crystal tier, which actually gives you some health regen and use the burst at the same time, but when there already is a talisman that can do this for you, and that's going to last the entire time, and you can just put on that talisman and rest at a grace to stay at full health, I'm not going to find any value with this one. Number 28, the Ruptured Crystal tier. Now yes, this thing does seem very fun, might be pretty viable in PvP in some instances, but in PvE, especially once you get later into the game, it's essentially useless, as it does result to your character just blowing up, but just doing a bit AoE in the process. You will actually do roughly 8 of faith, so it probably is a little bit of a missed opportunity. Number 27, the Verucan Hidden tier, which actually does remove all stamina consumption for a total of 15 seconds, which I just don't understand. Like the Cerulean Hidden tier, when they designed that, they used to last 15 seconds as well, and now since lasts 10 seconds, but that one actually had some pretty decent uses, because there were like really expensive spells out there that you benefit a lot just by holding onto the button, but with stamina, it's pretty forgiving in this game, and not many high damaging attacks actually really consume that much stamina, and even then, it regenerates by itself quickly, especially if you go ahead and do some stamina regeneration boosting items, like the Green Burst Crystal tier, which I'm just going to value a lot more, because that just lasts 3 minutes. I can't even think of a single instance where I actually would just use this tier. Like this thing should at least be lasting like 45 seconds to a minute. Number 26, the Leaden Heart tier, which actually does give you a bunch of poise and hype armor for only 10 seconds, so it might be something more sort of PvP than its own PvE. Now, there might be some skills out there that are pretty hard to use that you might benefit off this crystal tier, but don't get any damage negation. And with how hard some of these bosses actually hit, it might have been more of a downside. And also, it's not even like infinite hype level 2, like we still can very well just get staggered out of this by certain types of enemy attacks. Number 25, the Speckled Heart tier, which upon use it actually does cure all your status effects and give you boosted resistances to every single one by plus 90, and it does last 3 minutes. Now the thing is, in PvE, status effects are very far and few to begin with. It's already going to be a very niche tier as it is, and even then, status effects aren't really that dangerous. They're very easily countered. There's lots of different types of talismans to help boost your resistances as well. The chances of actually getting caught by a status effect are extremely low. And even if they do properly use, is it really worth it for an entire dedicated crystal tier just to counteract it? Probably not. Number 24, the Crimson Burst Drive tier, which is another one from the DLC. This one actually does give you health regen to surrounding and nearby allies, and it is only 7 HP per second, but it does last 3 minutes. And spell actually doesn't work on the player character, it is just allies. So basically, it's like the Crimson Burst Crystal tier, exact same effect, but it's just going to work in co-op and with spirit actions. Now the thing is, with spirit actions, it's practically useless, especially at the point of where to get this in the game, because it's not percentage-based health regen, and a lot of different spirit actions out there that have ridiculous amounts of health. It could potentially be more useful earlier in the game, where spirit actions have lower amounts of health, but you get it all the way in the DLC. So I would only really use this thing if you're trying to help out like newer players, and you could put in like a password down to just help out your friend that was the host. But outside of that, I would just use honestly almost anything else. Number 23, the Twiggy Practice Team, which actually does prevent all room loss upon dying, that is within 3 minutes of when you actually use the bomb itself. With honestly gaining this ability with an infinite use item is very cool, because typically along these games, to gain this effect, you'd have to use finite types of items. So if you are in an instance where you're like trying to explore like a dangerous place, you can go ahead and just use this crystal thing. I think the best use for it is that if you died and you wanted to get your rune back, I would probably use this tier instead, because the good thing is your runes are still going to be there even if you do die with this crystal tier active. But typically I wouldn't really have this on at all times, because in most cases you're not really going to be walking around with that many runes unless you're at really high levels, and even then you probably already know what you're doing, and it's like braces like every 10 steps in this game as well. Number 22, the Purifying the Crystal tier. Now this tier is specifically just used to counteract most heal attack, because typically it actually does like a whole bunch of damage to you, drops blink build-up, gives you a lot of health regen, it staggers you in the meantime as well, and you always have to use 3 healing flasks to be able to counteract it. But this makes it where you actually can damage it in the meantime, and only really take a little bit of damage, but yeah, you can already just do it for one boss, so I'm not going to really put it higher than this. Number 21 is the Crimson Bubble tier, which actually does give you 30% of your health back once you do drop below 21% of health. So it's kind of cool if you're getting combo to death and you're not going to really have an opportunity to actually use your healing flask. This will definitely just help you tank at least one more attack. Now it's going to be something that's more useful for PvP with how fast-paced the game actually is. But in PvE, in most cases, you're going to have an opening long enough to just use your healing flask anyway. So I'd probably just better off just using something else, especially because at some bosses in PvE can hit so hard that it's probably just going to completely bypass that 20% health, and in that instance, you're just not benefiting off this tier at all. It probably would be pretty cool if you like prevented death blows. So if you worry about to get like one shot by this crazy ass attack, it would just like automatically put you back to 30% health. I probably would have found some more value in that. Number 20, the Opaline Bubble tier. Now this actually does prevent 90% of all damage negation until you actually get hit. Yeah, so basically going to be good to just save like one healing flask sometimes, and it's going to be pretty useful for having a level 1 run until you actually get the Ritual Shield Talisman. But yeah, I don't really find much value in this crystal tier, because at best it just saves you from having to use one healing flask, where comparatively if you use something like the Opaline tier, this tier can probably end up saving you like 3 or 4 healing flasks. And even then, there's probably some times where you actually use this bubble tier and just get hit by some like small little pit start attack that wasn't going to really do much damage anyway, and they just completely with this wasted the crystal tier slot. But the only reason why it still gets this high is because at least you can get it early in the game, and it can be pretty good to have against certain types of bosses until you can get some better crystal tiers. Number 19 is the Cerulean Sapping Practice tier, which this one forms very much like the Crimson Sapping Practice tier, but actually gives you FP per hit instead of health per hit, but unfortunately it still lasts that same 45 seconds. But unlike the Crimson Sapping tier, you actually do get a decent amount of returns out of this thing, and 5 FP per hit. Unfortunately, it actually doesn't work with things like projectile attacks, but with these like multi-hit weapon skills that are close range, they can make for a nice parry. And it can very well just save you like 1 or 2 this FP flasks depending on how many times you're spamming this attack. Now obviously it's still situational, some different types of skills that are just not going to benefit off this at all, especially if they're already cheap. But some like multi-hit types of skills that are pretty expensive, this could be like a decent alternative. But once again, just like the other sapping practice tier, I would have rather this thing just last a lot longer. 45 seconds is not enough in my opinion. It would have been a lot more interesting if it lasted like 3 minutes, because it still is going to be somewhat situational, and with how broken some of like the damage boosting crystal tiers are in this game, having something that's just for FP regen is not going to be as broken. Number 18, the Oil Soaked tier, which upon use does oil up your character and nearby enemies, which the purpose of this does make enemies take 20% more fire damage, which obviously this can be really good for fire-based builds, but unfortunately there are going to be a bunch of different downsides. 1, it only lasts 45 seconds.
2, it's just still going to be outclassed by the fire tier, because the fire tier is just 20% more fire damage just for 3 minutes, and you don't have to be at closer range just the benefits. And also, once you actually do hit an oiled up enemy with fire damage, it's going to remove the oil effect, and you have to continuously stay close to them just the benefits. And there is a little bit of a cooldown as well. You can only like reapply the oil effects like once every couple of seconds. So it's not like you're going to spam catch flame the entire time at closer distance and benefit off that entire 20% damage boost. And for my testing, it only ends up doing roughly 15% damage instead. Now, it could be something that you can pair alongside with the flame tier, but in most instances, if you're going to go the fire damaging build, you're probably going to be expected the strength or faith, and I'd rather have the strength or faith tier, because those will just also last 3 minutes, not to give you as much of a damage boost, but it doesn't involve you having to stay at close range necessarily, and the fact that it lasts over 3 times as long means that I'm just going to prefer it more. But once you have to like hit the soft caps for things like faith, then yeah, you could very well go ahead and use the oil soaks tier, because it can just help you maximize your damage to certain types of close range attacks, because yeah, any single type of like fire-based projectile attack or multi-hitting fire-based attack is just not going to work very well. Even things like the Blasphemous Blade, being that it actually hits with both the blade and the projectile, and it hits with the blade first, is going to remove the oil effect, and the follow-up projectile attack, where most of the damage comes from, is not going to receive that 20% damage boost. Number 17, the Crimson Wall Bubble tier, which actually does convert all elemental damage taken into health. So yes, any single time that you're going to get hit by physical damage, it's just going to completely bypass, which most enemies in this game are going to be doing physical damage. However, there are going to be some types of attacks out there that are pretty challenging to try and dodge, that will just purely just do elemental damage, but it only lasts 15 seconds. So you have to use this tier just before you see the attack come out, and saving a tier just for this one specific circumstance might not end up being for the best, but I guarantee there are some different types of attacks out there that people that just struggle with all the time, and using this crystal tier can just completely negate those things.
There's a proven way to enhance athletic performance by up to 10%. Fans, cheering in the stands. Become a performance-enhancing Canadian.
Hey there, consider this. When you invest, it's performance that matters most.
Number 16 is the Cerulean Hidden tier, which does completely negate more FP consumption for 10 seconds. So at the start of a boss fight, you can just use this tier and then spam all of your like most expensive spells. You probably end up saving yourself like an FP flask or two maybe, but it's definitely best paired alongside different types of spells like Comatizeur or Meteorite Other Spell, to which these spells are very expensive. Now it's still going to be somewhat situational, because some bosses like move around a whole bunch, probably not going to be useful for those types of enemies, but at the very least sometimes you can just take like half an enemy's health bar off just by using this one crystal tier alongside this one spell, and you're going to be set up nicely for the rest of the boss fight. Number 15, the Crimson Burst Crystal tier, which is a health regen tier. That's give you 7 HP per second for 3 minutes, which is going to total to roughly 1200 HP. It can help with survivability, especially because you can get it pretty early on in the game, and 7 HP per second early on is actually really good. Now once you get later on in the game, I'm just not going to value it at all, because one, it actually doesn't stack with other health regen types of spells. Things like Blessing Spoon, Blessing of the Earth Tree, it's not going to stack with them, and those ones can be better in some instances, so you're better off just going in a different direction if you actually wanted to have some type of survivability. Number 14 is the Green Spill Crystal tier, which does boost your stamina by 15% for 3 minutes. Now the thing is, there is like a talisman in the DLC that boosts your stamina by 17%, so that's going to completely outclass this for the most part. Obviously these things can stack together, but I'm still going to value the talisman more because obviously it's not a timed buff. But you can get this one right at the beginning of the game. It can be one of the first crystal tiers you can grab. And the thing is, with the endurance stat, you don't really gain much of a benefit when it comes to stamina. You only end up getting like 2 stamina points per level. So something that actually boosts your max stamina bar by a certain percentage is actually going to be really good. It can roughly give you 10 points worth of endurance for the 3 minutes that it does last. So if you actually are going to go with certain types of builds, maybe like shield-based builds where you're going to do a lot of blocking, or if you're just pretty bad at stamina management in general, you can go ahead and use a crystal tier like this. Now the thing is, as I've always mentioned, when it comes to stamina, I'm always going to prefer stamina regeneration speed more so than a larger stamina bar. You're going to be operating between 0 and max stamina, and stamina regen is going to be much more valuable in this game. So although it is pretty useful, it could be a nice option for like shield-based builds or beginner types of players, I still consider it to be somewhat outclassed. Number 13 of the Crimson, the Crystal tier, which actually does give you, if you're at like later levels, like 50 or 60 bigger, it's going to require like 2 to 3 healing flasks just to get all the way back to max HP. Now the thing is, if you're getting hits that many times to where like you're running out of flasks, you're probably better off going with the Opaline tier. That is probably just going to end up being better. And it's going to open up like another Crystal tier slot as well, so you can actually use something else that's broken. But there really isn't anything bad I can say about the Crimson tier. Number 12, the Winged Crystal tier, which boosts your equipment load by 450% for 3 minutes. That means you can just go slap on like the heaviest and best armor in the entire game and the heaviest weapon and go ahead and drink this tier and then gain the ability to like light roll with this thing, which is just absurd. So you can very well just look at this as like the best damage negation tier in the game. Now obviously if you have like high endurance types of builds and you already have lots of equipment load already, this tier is not going to be that useful to you unless you actually wanted to gain the ability to light roll. And light rolling is pretty good. It's not going to be that much better than the regular medium roll. It still gives you the exact same iframes, but you can dodge a little bit further, which is nice. Now the downside of this tier is that it's going to be pretty inconvenient. You have to put on like larger types of armor, and if the buff wears off, then you have to switch off the armor so you can medium roll again, which means it's not going to be the most useful thing to use from grace to grace. So it's inconvenience, and the fact that it still can be outclassed by things like the Opaline tier, especially at higher levels, kind of make me not value it as much, but it still is extremely powerful. Number 11, the Glovewort Crystal tier, which actually does boost the damage of your Spirit Ashes by 20%, and that does last 3 minutes. You don't have to be standing next to the Spirit Ash at all. You can use it before or after you actually summon your Spirit, and with some of these Spirit Ashes in the game, they can just do ridiculous amounts of damage. You can just slap this tier on alongside your own tier to just boost your damage, and you can be melting everything. Like, Spirit Ashes can be one of the best ways to just cheese the entire game, and this thing can just make those builds just even better. Number 10, the Windy Crystal tier, which actually does enhance your dodge rolling, actually gives you more iframes for both medium and fat roll, which does equate roughly to around about 20% more iframes, and actually does last 3 minutes, but there is the downside of you taking 15% more damage. So it does work very similar to the Crucible Feather Talisman, but that one actually does give you like an additional iframe to work with, but actually makes you take 30% more damage, which honestly I am going to prefer the Windy tier a bit more, because the iframe difference is not that much more, but the damage negation penalty is going to be half as less. Now obviously one is going to be infinite use and the other one is a timed buff, and so you cannot stack both of them together. But the thing is, you can very well use this Crystal tier and then pair it alongside the Opaline tier, which gives you 15% more damage negation across the board, and that's going to completely negate it. And it is extremely noticeable as well. Like, I've played this game for 4,000 hours, so I know exactly when I'm going to get hit, or if I'm not going to get hit when I'm rolling. And in this Godskin duo fight that you see right now, and there was at least like 4 instances where I should have gotten hit, but I didn't because I had this tier equipped. And the best form of survivability is just not getting hit in general. Now the thing is, this tier is only going to be useful in those instances where like you were supposed to get hit but you didn't. But if you haven't used this tier already, I recommend that you do, because it does feel really nice. Number 9, the Stone Barbed Cracked tier, which actually does boost your stamina damage to blocking enemies and your stance damage by 30%, but it does only last 30 seconds. But it still can very well just cheese a whole bunch of bosses and script some of them as well, because with certain types of like attacks or skills, with this Stone Barbed tier equipped, you can be stance breaking them in like 1 less hit, or maybe just like 1 combo can just straight up stance break them just outright. Like, it can be such a powerful tier sometimes, just being able to stance break enemies just a bit earlier and a bit more consistently. Now, the fact that it does only last 30 seconds, and it's probably only going to help you stance break like a bit faster just the first time. In certain types of boss fights, I'm not going to really bother, especially because there are other different tiers out there that can just help boost your damage by so much more and last 3 minutes. Number 8, the Green Burst Crystal tier, which actually does boost your stamina recovery speed by over 30%, which is just ridiculous, because for comparison, the 2-headed Eternal Talisman boosts your stamina recovery speed by 22%, and as I mentioned, stamina recovery speed is just more important than having a large stamina bar, because you're always going to be operating in between 0 and max, and it's getting your stamina bar back quicker means that you can just like dodge more often, you can attack more often. Like, it basically governs everything that you really do. Now if you're a person that has really good stamina management to begin with, this Crystal tier is not going to be as valuable to you. If you're like ever confused as to like what to put on for your last Crystal tier slot, this would be one of them. Number 7, we're going to touch on all of the not Crystal tiers, which include the Strength, Dexterity, Intelligence, and Faith. Unfortunately, there is no Arcane Nuts tier, do not know why, but these actually boost those stats by plus 10 for 3 minutes, which these Crystal tiers are not only going to just help you meet the requirements of certain types of spells or weapons really easily, but they're just also just going to help boost your damage. Now, if you have like already hit the soft caps of using like weapons at lower levels where they're typically not going to really get good ceilings, it's not going to boost them by that much. But if you do have like a decently leveled weapon and you haven't already hit the soft caps, this could very well mean like 5 to 10% more damage sometimes. Now, out of all the ones on this list, I find the Faith tier to be the most useful, because not only is it useful for Faith builds, but it's useful for all builds because it can actually help you meet the requirements for things like Golden Belt, which could result in even more damage. And also, if you have like strength types of builds, I would just use the Faith tier as well. So you can also use things like Golden Belt, other different types of spells, alongside the Clawmark Seal. And even with an Arcane build, I always recommend just going into some Faith. So you can use the Dragon Communion Seal, and you can actually help you meet the requirements of things like Grail's Rule, Dragon Lore, and other different types of incantations. Number 6, the blood-sucking cracks tier, which does boost your damage by 20% for 3 minutes, but it does have the side effect of draining your health by 20 HP plus 0.2% of your max HP per second, which by the time that you get this in the game in the DLC, you're probably going to be around about 60 health, so it does like roughly equates to 1% HP per second, which you can go ahead and try and counteract this thing with different types of health regen buffs, and it can work pretty well, but yeah, this thing is just basically 20% more damage, which is just insane. Now, if you are a person that's not as good at the game, but you're struggling to find certain types of bosses and you're trying to learn their movesets, I wouldn't recommend going with this tier. I'd only really use this tier if you're already comfortable in fighting certain types of bosses, or if you're actually using things like the Blasphemous Blade, which is like the best weapon in the entire game, for the reasons being that it does a fuck ton of damage, and it gives you health back for every single hit with the skill. And so this tier is just going to pair perfectly alongside with that, because you can just keep spamming the skill and just keep getting your health back, and this like health regening mechanic, it's going to be made completely obsolete. So the fact that this tier just synergizes perfectly with the best weapon in the game automatically makes it an S tier option, but it just does well with everything else too. Number 5, the Opaline Hearts tier. Now, this, as I mentioned with the Green Burst Crystal tier, this is like the other tier that I would use if you're just not sure what to use. Because no matter what, you're going to benefit with any different type of build, as this thing actually does boost your damage negation by 50%, and that is to every damage type. And with how hard enemies hit in this game, using this thing, you're just only going to benefit. Like, there really isn't ever an instance where like the Opaline tier, it just isn't good to have. Number 4, the Spiked Crack tier, which actually does boost your charged heavy attack damage by 15%, which charged heavy attack builds can be some of the best in the entire game, because they don't consume any FP, they're typically going to stand spray faster than anything else would, and it is going to be extremely easy to use. Things like Starfist heavy attack builds, what is like a regular club, doesn't matter what it is, these builds can just be utterly broken sometimes, and the fact that we have a dedicated tier to just boost it by 15%, that you literally get like at the beginning of the game, that's right next to a talisman that could boost your charged heavy attacks. Like, you can very well just make a broken charged heavy attack build from start to finish just by picking up these items. Like, it might not perform as well as jumping attack builds or skill spamming builds, but charged heavy attack builds are going to be one of the best ones to use early on, and it's going to be the one that requires the least amount of side investment too. Number 3, the Thorny Cracks tier, which does actually work like the multi-hit talismans, just in a crystal tier format. So if you get multiple hits off in a quick succession, you are going to get a damage boost, and there are 3 separate tiers to this. The first tier being 9% damage, second tier being 13% damage, and the third tier being 20% damage. Now, to reach these certain tiers and thresholds, it depends on like what types of weapons that you are using. Typically, it will be around about 3 to 5 hits per tier. So obviously, quicker power sensitive type weapons are going to benefit greatly off this tier. And honestly, just any quick weapon in general can benefit, because it actually does have a decaying effect, but it actually does take a while for it to reset and work back down to the bottom. So this could very well just be like almost 20% more damage throughout an entire boss fight. And 20% more damage is just as big as a damage boost as things like the blood sucking tier, but there is just literally no downside. It is just free damage as long as you're happy. Number 2, the Deflecting Heart tier, which is probably the best thing to come out of the DLC, and I don't really know why people want this thing to be a talisman, because this thing is definitely better off being a crystal tier. But I guarantee if this thing was a talisman, there'd be like some stupid side effects to come alongside with it, and also just like no benefits, it would just be like deflecting and that's it. But for this crystal tier in particular, it does give your character the ability to get like a perfect guard or a deflect, which means that if you do like block at the exact same time that an enemy does attack you, which it actually is a pretty forgiving time, and you can just very well just spam block the entire time and most likely just get a deflection. But upon deflection, you'll not only just take a lot less stamina damage, but you're basically going to negate all physical damage taken and 75% of elemental damage taken too. But best of all yet, it's going to boost the damage and stance damage of your guard counters. And it's not like it's a small boost as well. It can actually boost your damage up to 80% more and your stance damage by 50% more. So the damage is dependent on how many times you do get a deflection before you go for the guard counter. And it can stack up to 4 times. And these stacks do take roughly 5 seconds to reset. So not only can you just like spam block the entire time and just not take any type of damage against enemies, but you're also just not going to take much stamina damage. You're also just going to get like a stupidly cracked up version of a guard counter that does ridiculous damage, and it sand sprays enemies faster than almost any other attack build in the entire game. Because you have typically guard kind of skip just as much stand damage as like a charged heavy type, and alongside certain types of weapons like colossal weapons or frostbane shields, great hammers, even stuff like backhand blades, they can just do ridiculous amounts of damage output, and all these like smaller types of enemies are just going to get teased completely. And best of all yet, this crystal tier lasts 5 minutes. So it's definitely going to last you easily from like grace to grace. It might last you an entire dungeon experience. It's definitely going to last you an entire boss fight as well.
Yeah, this thing is probably one of the most broken things in the entire game. Even if you have a build that doesn't really benefit of like a really good guard counter, you can very well just use it and then spam what just to be able to just survive. You're just really confusing that how to dodge certain types of attacks. Now, the only reason why I'm not going to put it at number 1 is because it still does require some skill, and also against large types of bosses, it's not going to be the best thing to use. I'd only really use it against smaller types of enemies, because they're going to be much easier to try and deflect and get a guard counter off. That's really the only reason that's probably for putting it number 1, but it still is broken. And at number 1, we have the Shadow Practices. Yes, it's a boring thing, but like, honestly, what else could I put at number 1 outside of these? This would boost your elemental damage by 20% for 3 minutes with no downside. Like, some of the most broken builds in the entire game are like spell spamming builds or like projectile skill spamming builds. Now, obviously, if you got a build that utilizes elemental damage, then basically it's useless for you. But if you do utilize elemental damage, then yeah, any single one of these ones is going to do it for you. Okay, we're finally done all 27 of them now. Rants, as always, let me know what your opinions are down in the comments below. And as for the next regular video, probably going to go over the incantations, so there's like roughly 130 of them. But definitely do subscribe for that, because it's going to require a lot of effort. So I would appreciate any type of support. Anyway, catch you guys around. Bye.
And Montana's comfort is a feeling and a flavor. Dig into our comfort classics. Thick-cut smokehouse maple bacon, maple brisket smash, and the twisted Reuben. Why not pair it with a Molson Canadian? Cozy up at Montana's, Canada's home for barbecue.
Easy fucking trade for a pro strap pick.
Start strong.
Sell later this one extension anyways, so might as well fucking trade him.
Alright, welcome back to more Elden Ring. Alright, I want to take a minute to say thank you so much for all the support so far on this series. Only on part 3. But all the support, I've been reading a lot of the comments on these videos because I'm kind of learning the game as I go. I've been kind of studying other people's videos, you know, trying to kind of see what's the hot thing to do in this game. So, alright, love you all, best luck as ever. If you want more of this game, just throw that like button. I'm kind of just going video to video based off of you guys want more. So, alright, love you all. Let's get... Alright, we're back. So to go ahead and kind of just run with me at a campfire. Figured I would just kind of be running around. I was kind of doing some exploring. Not sure what's back over there. There's like things hanging.
Oh, shit!
Take a thing. 4 of those things right there.
The same fire.
Alright, buddy. Oh, look at this thing! Hey, buddy!
Good.
I hope you don't drop anything valuable, because I did not want to attack you. Turtles hold a special place in my heart. Oh, let me check one out. I've seen these everywhere.
Standard.
Something cool is not functional. So I'm assuming if you see this type of thing somewhere, little statue with the person on it.
Yeah, I'll take it linear, actually.
Makes sense. We got a little nice little bar.
Ranger's going to trade
What's going on?
Not surprised, actually.
There's some more crackers back here. Okay. There was a spot over here somewhere.
Maybe. Guard captain, so he's not going anywhere.
Oh, it's a campfire. Hey, here we go. Here's something.
It's not going anywhere, too. They don't want him anyway.
Stuff on the ground. I get kind of nervous, you know what I'm saying? Well,
You're going to expendable now.
Alright, we're going wherever this takes us, I suppose. I'm not sure if it's like a vault area. Okay, we have a space spot of these guys. Hey, I'll put as many blue maps as I can. And there's a little statue right there so we can summon them. What I'll do... Wait, can I summon and then... Well, I guess maybe not. No, functional. Oh, the summoning pool, it might be... It might enter the world probably for, like, other people helping you. I'm playing off blind, so I don't think I'll use that ever. Okay, move on. There we go. 92. How you doing there, buddy? I like how anytime you get into a fight, it's like a standoff. Easy. Okay, we got a couple options here. Wait, can they attack each other? That will be amazing. Hey, come on up here. Looks like something that will hurt. Yep.
Oh shit, we got that should really be Goldie right here.
I thought like people were opening, but I guess not. Okay. We're getting destroyed on a regular basis. I'll take it. You know, these the loading screens in this game are fantastic. I have to admit. Maybe it's one of the stomach things here. Oh, let me get. What if I just run past everything? I feel like if I did that, I would never level up. Wait. Let's see the crowd walk everywhere. What are these? Oh my god. It's time to go. How about you? It's time to go. We got giant rats in here. We got some skeletons. Hey, stay up there, please. Somebody asked on Twitter if I had a goal for this game, like what I want to do. I would like to beat it. That would be the ultimate goal. Whether or not I can actually do that, we will find out. Probably more of those critters, if you would. You got homeboy over there gathering rocks, mining. All right, Mark, let's go scrap, okay? I don't mind fighting every day. They don't seem to have that much health. I can't imagine they would. This guy, you know. I want to fight you. I can imagine using like a magic against these guys. This makes it so much easier.
Hey, wow, that's a deep, heavy drive. Shit won't blew all my prospects. Down! The future is set for Vancover now.
There, whatever. Let's go. Everything back over here looks like
Yeah, there is Captain, so he's not going
what is the
anywhere.
purpose of coming down here? We have something below this. Can you get back there? I swear I see something like over there, like glowing. Like you can get to it, but maybe not. I don't know. I don't see anything else down here. I guess it's just this little section. So we're gonna go back up. That would be more to this spot than that, because like what was I guess maybe that's the material I just picked up. The one thing I can think of, right? Go back up. Unless it was something I missed.
Oh, that kid's to be a fucking monster. especially with Tom Hollander, and see, Young Four is coming to Vancouver. Yeah, Young Four will be really good.
Like a little heavy seconds are getting up. And great. And shot.
Ooh. Fresh spell off hard.
I use the controls. Let me use this in here. Or I just missed it with it. I looked to use my other weapon, and it just fell flat. It's like, oh thanks, okay. I probably should have made the other flat, but you can kind of adjust them. It's pretty cool. Alright, we're getting these rats back, so relentless rats. What is back here?
And he grew. That's actually not bad. Yeah, he grew. And look at that.
Don't see their ammo.
Surgicals, 37
I
points, not bad, I guess, for us. I'm expecting Gardner to have these kids like in shape. I didn't trade him. You guys should have, but I did not trade him. It's maybe 6 mil. He's no room cost for 3 years, so at least the camp's pretty nice for 3 years.
Alright, cool. So what, I mean, this area has to lead somewhere, right? We hop down, came back here. I mean, they're just kind of mining it up. I don't want to mess with them.
Deputy
head back down here again. See what's up.
Down.
There's got to be something like this, right? Oh, right there. That might have been a spot I could hop off. Okay, that probably was it. I'm going to hop off right there. Let's see.
I'm going to get your contract extension.
This seems like...
Temporary Giants, too. Okay, there you go. Cool.
Just more the same.
Old Town Boy.
Let's see. We got enemies everywhere. Kind of just run for it. I don't have much health. I feel like fighting these enemies will take forever.
Now, I guess, too. Sign him, too. Get everybody going on your DLCs.
It's a whole different one right here. Okay. Let's see where this goes. Alright. Let's look around this. Okay, there was a spot to jump right there. That might have been
the Monday nights.
And God, there's like a door right here. Okay. Does this open up from this side and maybe it's like a... Yo, what is this? Oh, it's more of that. Yeah, it's funny. Every time I say what's this, it's always gonna be stuff. Open. This won't be a boss or anything. I see something large on the other side of the door. Oh my god, what is that? Yeah, I'm stuck in here now, alright? Why do you look like the eat thing from the hero? Oh my god. Oh, jeez. I feel like I'm doing no damage. I'm not able to hit. Okay, well, you know what? The good news. You get some of the folks here. I have a class, so we kind of know where it's at. We'll spawn back at the other area. Oh, this state, perfect. That is perfect. That little statue right outside, you can spawn there or the other one. This thing right here. That's what that's for. Okay. That is awesome. The fact that that's a little checkpoint, I will take it. I'm not worried about losing my little 500, hold on. Oh, no. Let's go back. Did I get here? Bye-bye. See you later. Yeah, I got hop right there, but I didn't see anything there. Okay. Well, you go through here. I'm going to summon the wolves immediately and just kind of keep my distance to see how they do against the boss. You know what I mean? Yeah. Come on, 15 there. Okay. No, he actually like acknowledges it too. That's pretty cool. I didn't realize that. I just realized. Okay, you did me out. You up, Mark? Still alive.
2 years stuck in your move. Okay, that's good.
Yeah, I could like kind of big.
Two of those walls. It'll be 30 by the time I trade. I'm looking at them.
This might be play. I don't know. What you guys think? Yeah, I was a little bit left in summon, but not enough, I don't think. I wonder if I have to wait for like an extra time. Alright, not sure if there's like a cooldown on the wolves or what. I just realized it's like I'm hitting a wall, hitting somebody swing at him. Alright, so there's heavy attack. Seems like to be the play here. I guess technically you're hitting a skull wall, right? That's kind of why it's like a ricochet effect anytime you Oh my god. Oh my god, it might kill me. Actually blocked that dog. Hey, we got pretty good. We got over halfway, so I'll take it. Here's the thing, I didn't understand. So about the, I guess, summoning the wolves. This one keeps respawning here. I'm gonna beat this boss in this video, 100%. I think I can take him. It's just anytime you swing, it's like you have, you just have a lot of like the ricochet back because it's like you're hitting a wall in here, you know. All right, let's try this out. I don't think I can get on the elevator. I'm not sure actually. Oh my god. Oh, this is not happening. Are you kidding me? I gotta run to the boss for safety. I love it. Hey, let's go. Hit it, boys. That is a lot of damage.
cheese to elevate your needs. The Scotties you know, but even softer. Try Scotties Ultra Soft.
Kind of back in the war already. I just gotta be very cautious here, but there's like not really anything I can do. But even if I use this, I get it there. Nice. Roar Medallion. That's pretty cool. That item we did. Oh, let's see what we got here. Enhance its roar and breath attacks. Pretty cool area. I didn't know what was going on at first. I was like, what? And it was like, this enemy over here. It's like kind of crazy. It reminded me of the thing from Sekiro, though. You know what I mean? Our return to entrance. That was awesome. Oh, look at that. Look at that loading screen. Just pure art. I love it. Alright, we kind of checked that out pretty quickly, I thought. Let me go down here and just like, actually I realized I can just fast travel away. Let's go back to the church. There we go. I had a lot of fun with this game. Thank you so much for joining me today. I've just been having fun with it. I can upgrade here, at least, or level up. Okay, so not sure here. What do I want to do? Endurance seems to be a big thing too, because stamina, you're constantly, you know, on the ropes. It feels like, but at the same time, I feel like I need to increase endurance a little bit. The magic defense, lightning, holy, body immunity goes up, robustness, focus.